impressed with the number of people that were crowding the sidewalk. I mean, there were plenty of people out.
Yeah, our bike officers who kind of lead it every year, they stated that it was, probably 3/4 or more is a typical year. So they thought it was a really good response as well.
It's good.
Carol, next year you should turn the rain off.
Yeah, we've got that one. Don't worry about it, James.
Okay.
I'm more than just a parks director to you. I'm Harry Wappler, or Little Wappler.
There you go. All right, I'm going to give it another minute before we get started. Councilmember Stearns is attempting to log in.
Mr. J-Rod, we hear you munching. Sounds good.
Nuts. By the way, my name is Jayaraj.
J-Rod. Excuse me.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. This is our City Council study session for November 8th, 2021. We will call this meeting to order. And this meeting is being held tonight, both virtually and in person. Your City Council is all meeting virtually this evening. And with that, Sean, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember J-Raj.
I'm here.
Councilmember Malenga.
She's excused.
Councilmember Stearns.
Here.
Councilmember Trump Manuel.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any announcements, reports, or presentations this evening?
One announcement. I think I got jumped over in the roll call. I am here.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Brown.
Sorry, Councilmember Brown.
No problem.
No other announcements. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move right into our agenda items for discussion this evening. We've got a very large packet, Council, as you're aware. We will start this evening with the Auburn Symphony Orchestra 2021 contract report, and we'll turn it over to Director Faber.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. I'm joined this evening with Rachel Perry. She's the Executive Director of the Auburn Symphony Orchestra, and I believe Wesley Schultz, the conductor, and Tanya Roddle from the ASO board as well, and Julie Kruger, who works on our staff, especially events and marketing manager, who coordinates the contract that the city has done annually with the symphony for many years. So I'm going to hand it over to the experts who manage IT and to Rachel as well for their annual presentation. It's been a strange year with COVID, but I know numerous of you did attend their concert over in Federal Way, and it was very successful, as well as some of their other endeavors that they pivoted to this last year. So we're excited that the city continues to support the symphony, as well as to listen this evening to their annual report. Thanks a lot, and I'll turn it over to Julie or Rachel, whoever's kind of handling the presentation portion. And I know it has a video with it as well.
Yes, hi everybody. Thanks for your time this evening. We're going to kick off our presentation with a short excerpt of a piece that we recorded in April of this year. It was released online in May. So we're going to share with you the first couple minutes of Mozart's Symphony number 41.
Council, just one moment.
I think if Tanya is on this call.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hello, and I would like to introduce myself as Tanya Rottle. I'm the current chair for the Auburn Symphony Board, and I'd like to welcome Mayor DeCoursey and City Council members. We have a very good presentation for you tonight, and I wanted to let you know that last year we produced over 15 online programs, 4 which were educational videos and 4 archival videos, and these were all for free online. Our board is strong of 14 engaged board members. We meet regularly and are active on 6 committees to serve the needs of our organization. We are emerging stronger from the pandemic and presenting 6 full symphony concerts instead of 4 as in the previous years. And Rachel is going to give you some in-depth details about how we are operating for this year and what to expect. And I'll turn it over to Rachel for right now. Thank you for meeting with us.
Yes, so this season, as you, I'm sure you know, we had to temporarily move to Federal Way Performing Arts Center. As we were planning this season, we were in close contact with the Auburn School District to see if the Auburn PAC would be available. And unfortunately, of course, during COVID, nobody can predict the future. And we just weren't able to know if we were going to be able to be in the Auburn PAC in time to plan our season. And so had to do that temporary move. But we are looking forward to being back there next season. And back in August is when we officially launched this current season. We had a string quartet concert at Sioux Creek Botanical Garden, outdoors, absolutely beautiful. And that's actually one of the first, well, the first place we recorded programs in September 2020, when we couldn't have a live audience and being outside was safest. And so we were really excited to return there. We had 200 people in attendance, which was just a wonderful turnout. Everybody was so excited to be there. It was a beautiful day. And it was a great way to sort of kick off our season back with the live audience. And then in October, we had our first live full symphony concert indoors. We are very pleased to have Deputy Mayor DeCoursey do some opening remarks. Thank you. And thank you for your service and support over the years. And council members Brown and Baggett were also in attendance, and we did everything necessary to help keep people safe. So we actually implemented vaccine verification or a negative COVID test for entry even before the county guidelines went in place. And the Federal Way staff were able to help us do that to keep everybody safe. It worked out well. And we are just really pleased to have everybody back. I think if you were there, then you know that everybody was just kind of buzzing from the experience. And while our musicians always play at a high level, I mean they're professionals. They also, I mean, to hear the difference between the recordings and the live, the way they respond to the live audience was just really fun. I forgot, they're just that much better when they have a live audience there. So this season, we're also really pleased that our subscribers have returned. Over 90% of our subscribers returned compared to pre-pandemic numbers. We offer 4 and 6 concert subscription packages, and the overwhelming majority of them have done all 6 concerts this season. And our single ticket buyers are a little bit slower to return. That's what we're seeing sort of across the performing arts industry, though. And our holiday concert on December 13th is already tracking ahead of numbers for the October concert. It's going to be an even bigger audience in our October concert. So we're hoping to continue that trend throughout the season. We purposefully backloaded the season. So we have 4 concerts, January to May, to hopefully, as COVID circumstances continue to get better, hopefully that we can continue to welcome more and more people back into the hall. And So now I will hand it over to Wes. He's going to talk about some programs that we have coming up, both on the stage and education programs.
Thank you, Council, for having us today. Several of you attended our first concert. You enjoyed that program that featured music by Mendelssohn, Mozart, and Joseph Bologna, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges. But this season, we're offering 6 programs, as we've mentioned. And as some of you may be able to remember, back in season number 1, the city supported by the concert what the symphony was doing, which was 1 or 2 concerts a year. So we're pleased that now 25 years later, we have continued to be supported by the City Council and the City of Auburn as our primary support. And now we are finally expanding to 6 programs. So we're offering 4 classical concerts. So later in the season, we will present standard works by Tchaikovsky and Berlioz and Aaron Copland. But we're also committed, as we have several years back, to presenting living composers, women composers, and historically marginalized composers. So in the spring, you'll hear music by Huang Ruo, a Chinese-American composer, also music by Florence Price, the first African-American woman who she's regarded as the first to write symphonic music. We're pleased to present her violin concerto with Bella Hristova as soloist. We're going to present the Guild Dance Company, presenting their own original storytelling of Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring. And we'll close the season with music by Berlioz, his Symphonie Fantastique, and Germaine Taillefer, her Concertino for Harp and Orchestra. She was one of the most famous French composers in the 19th century. We're also super excited that now that students are back in schools, we can really start to gain traction with our education programs. We had a meeting last week with all of the general music teachers of the Auburn Public Schools, and they all voted in mass to partner with us in putting on Carnegie Hall's Link Up program. This program will touch all 4th graders in the Auburn School District, and it is an enhancement or an addition to the curriculum that teachers are already teaching. So through this program with Carnegie Hall, the students will be playing recorders, singing, dancing, moving, learning about music, all types of composers, all types of musical styles. It is something that we are doing in tandem with the teachers, the Auburn Symphony and the teachers. And if circumstances allow, in April, the culminating experience will be for all 4th graders in the school district to come to Auburn Performing Arts Center and hear a special concert of the Auburn Symphony. This is a concert that's only for them. It's not open to the public. It's just the students, the teachers, and chaperones. And it is the culminating event of the curriculum they've been working on. So they will sing with the orchestra. They will play the recorders with the orchestra. They will move with the orchestra. So we are super excited for this program. It's been years in planning, and we're excited that the teachers all voted that they believe it's of value to them and their students. We're also continuing our collaboration with the Interurban Center for the Arts, in which we combine visual art with music. So this has been happening over several years, in which we choose music, and then an art docent creates art projects based on that music, and then goes to classrooms, sometimes virtually now during COVID, other times in person, sometimes with the musician, depending on the COVID circumstances, and goes to the classroom, and together they create art, listen to music, and tie together both of those things. So we're excited that that's also continuing this year. And then again, this is our 25th anniversary season, so we're kind of marking that in little special ways throughout the year. But just want to point out that the council and the city have been with us from the start, and without that support, the symphony wouldn't exist. So we are just grateful for that. That the belief in world-class music, live music, right here in Auburn. So that's all I have, and I think Rachel and Tanya. So now we're just open it up to any questions that the council may have.
Oh, council, questions for Rachel, Tanya, or Wes? Yes, Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I don't have a question. I just have a remark. Wesley and Rachel, I'm so excited to hear that you got the teachers, music teachers, excited to take part on this. As when I met with Rachel and Nancy earlier, I shared with Rachel about the time that I first was introduced to the violins and all that. I was in probably 3rd, 4th grade when our school went to a concert. They loaded us up, all of us in a bus, took us there. We all sat in front of them. And that was my first experience and I loved it. And so I'm glad that you're doing that with our local students, because I'm sure it's going to leave a mark in them for the rest of their lives that they may want to get into it themselves. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to first off thank Rachel and Wesley for reaching out to us as council members in support of the symphony orchestra. And I just have to say, it was my first time being in a live concert, and I was just astounded by the sound. I'm going to have to subscribe. It's just really what, I've heard it music, on a record player and tells you how old I am. And then, of course, on TV. But I also want to thank Tanya, and Linda Springer for your, work and support of the symphony orchestra, all the time that you put into it. So it's a wonderful asset in our community. And thank you very much for the work you do.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, congratulations, everyone. It's fantastic. I was just sort of curious how, for the Appalachian Spring, how you got connected with the Guild Dance Company.
Sure. Actually, the choreographer or founder of the Guild is Alex who's actually been a longtime friend of mine. I used to be the music director of the Bainbridge Symphony, and he taught at the Bainbridge Dance School. And we sort of partnered our organizations back during that iteration of our lives. So I'm now here in Auburn, and Alex started up this Guild dance company of his own. So he's, and it's actually a collaboration with the Reno Chamber Orchestra. And so they are presenting this production of Appalachian Spring in 2 weeks, actually. Rachel and I are going to go out to Reno and watch this first performance of it. And then they're going to do it with us in April. But this is just part of our belief and our vision with the Auburn Symphony. We're not just about bringing people into the concert hall to see just us. We are big on collaborating in a multitude of ways in our education programs, and this dance program is one way to sort of reimagine pieces of music that we've known and loved for the last 100 years, but now presented in a new way. So they're going to tell a slightly different story than Martha Graham's, but with the permission of the Graham organization and the publisher of Aaron Copland's music, and they've given their blessing to updating the story to the 21st century. So we're especially excited about that collaboration.
Wow, cool. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Comments? Well, I got to tell you, it was really an honor being there on October 3rd at the first live concert since March of 2020. So it's a long time coming. And I didn't want to walk out after my presentation and disrupt the concert. So I stayed back in the wings with Rachel for a little while until she had to go out and do some other things. But it was kind of nice being kind of right there. And, I had kind of that real bird's eye view right there for at least half the concert, which was really, really good. And it was wonderful. And as it was mentioned during the concert, many of the musicians, I guess most of the musicians, have been together playing since the beginning. It's amazing having all those musicians together and still staying together. That speaks loudly for the leadership of not only Rachel for her work, but also Tanya with you and the board to support the musicians that do the work that they do to make people happy. That's so I'm really, really pleased to see that. And also, as Councilmember Trout Manuel said, and I mentioned during my presentation, the work with the schools, tremendous, just wonderful, wonderful work with the schools, showing these students the benefits of music. During my substitute teaching time a few years ago, they asked me to take a very early morning elementary school music group that was coming in to do their practice. This was like at 7:15 in the morning. And these young children, I guess they were truly engaged. I mean, they knew exactly what to do, how to do it. And they sounded really good. even at that young age. So looking forward to seeing them playing in the symphony in the future with that. Councilmember Baggett, you had a comment.
Yeah, I like Councilmember DeCoursey and I think it was Councilmember Brown. We attended that first performance and it was really a knockout. Wesley, Rachel, Tanya, you all did a great job, and we're looking forward to getting back to the pack over here. And having seen that performance, I can assure you that my wife and I will be attending many of the other ones. So thank you again for that, and keep up the good work.
Okay, with that, Rachel, Tanya, Wesley, thank you so much for your presentation this evening and for the continued work you're doing with the Auburn Symphony. And as Councilmember Baggett says, I think you will be seeing a few of us at future presentations. So once again, thank you very much for the work that you're doing. We're glad to support it. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
We look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Okay, now we will move on to our next item, which is the Auburn International Farmers Market 2021 season recap. Once again with Director Faber.
Oh, thank you again. For the record, Daryl Faber, Parks, Arts and Recreation Director. And it's great that we have the word arts in our title. Not many cities have that. And I think the symphony presentation, as well as some of the other events that we do around town, we really value the arts in Auburn. What you're going to see in this next presentation that's being done by Amanda Valdez. She's our special events coordinator with the city. And in that role, one of her major responsibilities is the Auburn International Farmers Market. And you're going to see some numbers that are really mind-boggling as far as it relates to growth. I think of all the things COVID did, it got people up on the hiking in the trails and outdoors and looking for healthy food and safe entertainment options. And so I'll just turn it over to Amanda, and I think Julie's online too as well if you have detailed questions. But you know, Sundays at Les Gove Park became very popular this summer after the first couple of weeks of kind of some bad weather. Once I got in charge of the weather, we really turned it on. So I'll turn it over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm going to share my screen so I can give you all a recap of the 2021 season. Okay. Oh. Okay. So as Daryl mentioned, my name is Amanda Valdez, and I coordinate the Auburn Farmers Market over at Les Gove Park. On September 19th, we wrapped up our 2021 season, and I'm grateful to be here today to tell you all about it. So let's go back to June of this year. Because of COVID restrictions from King County Public Health, our market went through a couple different versions this year. If you attended the market in June versus July, you would have had a very different experience each time. In June, we had a lot of restrictions and we were in an enclosed market space, as this map in front of you shows here. Our vendor capacity was limited and we had restrictions on the number of people we could serve and the types of activities we could have, which in June was pretty much nothing. This again is an image of our layout. We had lots of signage about rules and social distancing, and our goal was to keep everyone safe while providing access to those vendors that were able to attend. In late July, restrictions were lifted and we were able to completely transform the market. We expanded further out into Auburn Way and into Les Gove Park. You'll see on this July map here that we were able to accommodate more vendors while still providing safe social distancing and easy access to our vendors. We were also able to add back in some of the fun activities pre-COVID, like live entertainment, a nice picnic area with yard games, and our vendors were able to sample their products to the public again, which was huge for them. We took full advantage of the space in the park and were successful in keeping our vendors and activities safely spread out. This expansion made a huge difference in both the vendor and visitor experience. We saw a great increase in vendor sales, customer attendance, and just the overall feeling at the market. These are images of some of our vendors this season. Most of these vendors have been with us for many years, and we are really grateful to everyone that stuck with us through these last challenging seasons. Hopefully some of you got to visit them this summer and purchase their lovely fresh produce and local products. So as mentioned, we saw a huge increase in customer attendance. As Daryl said, these numbers are a pretty big difference. So pre-COVID, we saw around 24,000 people throughout the season. Then COVID hit and we saw a big decline and only saw around 1,700 people in 2020. This year, because of the expansion, we saw over 40,000 people. Now, these are estimated numbers to the best of our ability. Our volunteers walk around about every 20 to 30 minutes and count the number of people inside the market. So we know it's not an exact number, but it is very close. One benefit to COVID in 2020, because we had that completely controlled entrance and exit, that number is pretty accurate as we were able to just count people as they were coming in and they only had one way to get out. So the difference between 2020 and 2021 was just huge for us and no one was expecting it. It was really great to see so many people every Sunday and to see all of our vendors have a really successful season. We had 15 more unique vendors compared to last year, which means I worked with 55 individual vendors who attended the market multiple times throughout the year. If you add up those multiple attending days for every vendor, you would find that there were over more than 600 vendor opportunities. Compared to last year, when we were limited on vendor type and capacity, we only had 491 vendor opportunities. With more vendors came more sales. Our total vendor sales increased by 60% this year. We often had vendors selling out of product and trying to bring more and more each week to find that sweet spot to meet the community needs and just get their product out. This is a breakdown week by week of vendor sales, just so you can kind of see the trends that happen naturally throughout each season. You can see on this that we've had to cancel some weeks of the market over the years. This is mainly by extreme weather. We had unhealthy air quality from smoke in 2020, and we had an extremely hot weekend this past season where it wasn't safe for anyone to be outside, let alone farmers harvesting in fields. I've lived in Washington my whole life, and I don't ever remember a time where it was over 100 degrees in Washington. So we did cancel that week. And we only had 16 weeks in 2020 compared to we had 16 weeks in 2021 compared to the 17 weeks we've had in previous years. So this chart shows vendor sales peaking in July, and then we naturally start to see a decline in shoppers and sales come August. The green line on this chart in front of you is 2021, and you can visually see that even though we're naturally going up and down as the season progresses, vendors did exceedingly well compared to the previous years. For our farmers in particular, we saw a massive increase in usage of our food assistance programs, which contributed to higher vendor sales for our farmers and our processed food vendors. So at the market, we run 2 food assistance programs. We accept EBT, which was formerly known as food stamps, and we run a matching program that matches those EBT dollars up to $40 per customer every Sunday. Because of the pandemic, EBT cardholders received additional benefits this year. Students were also given what's called PEBT, pandemic EBT cards. So we saw more families, we saw children with EBT cards, and it was just a huge increase than we've ever seen before. In 2020, vendors accepted over $15,000 in EBT and the match combined. In 2021, vendors accepted over $47,000 in EBT and match combined. That number to us was very high and we couldn't have anticipated it. And it was a common occurrence across many markets throughout the state. This graph here shows the big jump from 2020 to 2021. You can see that yellow line where EBT was kind of steadily going up. So we couldn't have anticipated our huge jump this year. I would like to point out in this chart here in 2018, you see that big jump for the match. And that's because the city of Seattle, who was running the matching program at the time, had mailed out the matching vouchers instead of just having folks come to the market. So that portion of that program was very successful and folks used more match that year. So if they ever decide to do it again, we have the data that shows it was a successful program. Overall, we had a really great market season. In 2021, we were able to bring our volunteers back. We have about 9 really fantastic volunteers who return every year, and they contributed 230 volunteer hours of their time to help on Sundays. We're always looking for new volunteers, and you can learn more about how to volunteer on our website. We also partner with the Auburn Food Bank each year. This year, our farmers donated 4,365 pounds of fruits and vegetables to the Auburn Food Bank. I feel very fortunate to work with vendors that care and support our community. It's just so great to see them donating boxes and boxes of produce at the end of every Sunday. So our community showed up for us this year. The American Farmland Trust runs a contest every year for farmers markets. There are over 700 farmers markets nationwide that we know of, and many more that don't register as official farmers markets. So it's a big contest. There are a lot of options. This year, with 247 votes, we placed first in Washington State, 8th in the Pacific Northwest, and 60th nationwide. So a big thank you to everyone that voted, attended our market, and supported us. It just felt really good to get that title, and we were very excited about it. We'll be participating in the contest next year, so be sure to get out and vote. We are already looking forward to next season. We have received interest from many new vendors who plan to join us in 2022. We look forward to bringing back entertainment, live entertainment, and increasing our volunteer base, and hopefully hiring a couple folks to help with the market. So thanks for your time today, and we'll see you June 5th, 2022 at the Auburn Farmers Market. And
Amanda, thank you very much. Council questions or comments for Amanda? Council member Troutman, I'm sorry, Julie, you had a comment?
I did. I mean, thank you for letting us share all the exciting news about the market and the growth of the market. I just want to really recognize Amanda's work at the market. We've got a host of amazing volunteers, and we have really cool vendors, but it's a testament to Amanda's work that the market has really grown the way it has, and her ability to change and pivot based on all the restrictions that we had for the 2020 market, and again, the market this year, to really stand that market up, given all of those challenges because of restrictions, and to still allow us to hold the market because we were considered food access and an essential service. I really want to make note of her work in making the market happen over the last 2 years.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I was wondering why there was such a large increase in EBT SNAP this year. I was wondering.
Yeah, so definitely part of it is due to the expansion and the exposure from Auburn Way. With an increase of people comes more EBT users, but a large part of it was that EBT cardholders got a huge increase put on their cards because of the pandemic. I believe it happened a couple times throughout the pandemic. So that was great. They were getting more food assistance from the government. And then students who would typically be on low income or reduced food lunch, they received individual EBT cards. So if you had a family of 5, dad has an EBT card, and your 3 siblings also have an EBT card now. And what was so awesome to see is that those families were coming to the market to spend those dollars. They weren't going to Costco or Safeway or Fred Meyer. Those are all great places, but they chose to come to the Auburn Farmers Market to double their dollars with our matching program and support our farmers and get fresh local food. So it's big on the additional pandemic relief funds that folks received.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really good news, and that makes total sense. So it's not a permanent increase, or do you think it might be?
We are seeing that folks are still getting some pandemic relief, but I don't know if those numbers will continue to be dispersed like they have been. Once the pandemic is over, we'll probably see a little bit of a decline.
Okay, thank you.
And also, like Amanda explained too, the market offers a SNAP market match. And so if somebody chose to use, say, $40 of their EBT card, they would get $40 from this SNAP market match. So their money would double. So it was benefit for them to access those market match dollars as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have to echo Julie. Amanda, you did an awesome job. Every weekend that I was out there, you were out there talking to everybody, getting your volunteers to be where they're supposed to be. No matter what day it was, raining or not, you guys were doing such a fabulous job. I ended up going the last day of the farmers market, and I talked to all of your vendors, and they had nothing but good things to say about coming to our city and how they were so excited and they're going to come back because they really like our city. And Amanda, you know, you're the one that talks to them, so you get them excited to be here as well. So thank you for doing such a wonderful job for our farmers market. Thank you for a great job.
Councilmember J. Raj.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Julie, thank you very much for recognizing Amanda for her dedicated work with our city. The growth in the farmers market is amazing. I went there a couple of times this year myself. Amanda, great job. And can you elaborate on the Washington State, the voting process? What's that all about? Yeah, still not understanding that portion of it.
Yeah, so that is a nationwide contest ran through the American Farmland Trust, which is a nationally recognized organization that supports farmers markets and farmers. And they just run the contest every year. And we've never really, at least in my time here, we haven't really participated before. It was something our volunteers wanted to focus on. And I definitely try and meet the needs of our volunteers. So we advertised more on our social media and our website, and also on site on Sundays, just to get people to vote. And it gave our volunteers the opportunity to talk to folks about why our market's so great, why they love it, and why they should vote for us, essentially. So we hope to see those numbers grow. And it's really just pretty good bragging rights for us as a farmers market. We are part of the Washington State Farmers Market Association. So I get to say we're number one, at least for 2021. So that's what that's for.
Great job.
I'll also add, so that slide shows that we're number one in Washington State and number 8 in the Pacific Northwest, which might sound kind of confusing, but in the Washington State Farmland Trust, Pacific Northwest is Washington, California, Oregon, Idaho, and probably Montana. I don't know the whole collection of states that they consider, but yeah, so it's a big deal. But that Pacific Northwest is kind of slightly confusing because we use that word a lot in our area as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, that is quite an honor. So great work, Amanda and Julie. Thank you. And we look forward to the next farmers market season in Auburn. So we'll be there. So
thanks so much.
Good luck. Thank you very much. All right, Council, our next item on the agenda is Ordinance Number 6838. And this has a lot of paper in our packet. And this is with Director Tate.
Yeah, good evening, Council. Good evening, Deputy Mayor. I will turn it over to Alexandria Teague. Alexandria is a senior planner within the Department of Community Development, and she has a presentation that she'll provide on the details of this draft ordinance.
Right. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to sorry, bear with me while I share my screen. Wait. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Can you all see my screen or my notes, please?
We can see your notes.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Oh. Okay, how about that?
You are not sharing your screen.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And then. Okay, that should be correct, right?
Yes.
Ah, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. I'm used to sharing my screen in Teams all the time. All right, with that, I'll get started. So my name is Alexandria, and I'm a senior planner in community development. I'm here tonight to discuss an update, a text amendment to the airport-related zoning regulations, and a map amendment to the city's comprehensive zoning map. I have Tim Mensonides, the airport manager, here with me as well. I'd like to request that questions be held to the end. So a little bit of background. So during Auburn's 2020 annual amendment cycle, staff proposed and prepared text amendments for the comprehensive plan. These amendments were reviewed by the Planning Commission and subsequently reviewed and approved by City Council on December 2nd under Ordinance 6803. The amendment to the comprehensive plan was to strengthen the protection of the airport and its operations in the policy statements of the comprehensive plan. Now, as a follow-up to Ordinance 6803, staff has prepared and the Planning Commission is recommending updates to the airport-related zoning regulations. The materials for my presentation begin on page 24 of your packet, and I have about 19 slides to get through. All right. So before we get into the code update, I want to recap some airport history and information. Here is some background information about the airport, and I want to point out two things. One, the airport was built in 1969, and two, the airport is part of the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. I'll note these two things later on in the presentation. Let's see. All right. So some more background, the Airport Master Plan and the Airport Layout Plan. So the airport receives Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, and Washington State Department of Transportation, or WashDOT, Aviation Division grants and is contractually bound for grant assurances. Airport Master Plan, the cover shown here on the right, guides development on the airport. And the Airport Layout Plan, shown here on the left, depicts current and proposed airport features and infrastructure. To maintain eligibility for FAA funding, airports are required to periodically update their airport master plan. And in order to be listed on the NPIAS and to be eligible for FAA funding, an airport must have a current ALP that is approved by the FAA. So the FAA's role. The FAA does not have regulatory authority over local land use decisions. The FAA does not have the authority to regulate off-airport land use. The FAA does, however, have a role in regulating on-airport land use through the approval of the ALP and through grant assurances. The FAA has the authority to review proposed construction on and off the airport under the Federal Air Regulation, or FAR, Part 77. The FAA reviews for hazards to air navigation associated with obstructions and penetrations to navigable airspace. Examples are shown here on the right. The FAR Part 77 defines imaginary airspace surfaces for airports and helicopters that are designed to prevent hazards to air navigation. Now, Chapter 1838 of Auburn City Code contains a section of code related to the FAR Part 77 surfaces, sections that defined these surfaces and their respective height limitations. As I'll discuss later, staff is proposing a new code section related to the FAR Part 77 surfaces related to compliance and mitigation. So WSDOT's role. Similar to the FAA, the WSDOT does not have regulatory authority over local land use decisions. WSDOT is one of the state agencies that reviews local comprehensive plans and regulations. Under the Planning Enabling Act, RCW, cities, towns, and counties where a general aviation airport is located and operated for the benefit of the general public are required to discourage the siting of incompatible uses adjacent to such general aviation airport through the comprehensive plan and through regulations. So WSDOT's Airports and Compatible Land Use Guidebook, which the cover is shown here, and I'll refer to as the WSDOT Guidebook, contains guidance to help local jurisdictions create airport overlays. These are airport overlays that are intended to help airports and communities proactively prevent incompatible development, that's land use, around airports in the state. This guidebook provides the best practices and steps to create regulations designed to prevent and deter incompatible uses. This is the document that staff used as guidance to create Auburn's proposed airport overlay. And I'll discuss the airport overlay a little bit later. And now Auburn's role. So land use regulation is the responsibility of the city of Auburn. The city's regulatory authority is implemented in part through the city's municipal code. So Chapter 1838, this is the title page for that chapter, shown here on the right. Chapter 1838 of Title 18, which is the zoning code of the city's municipal code, contains the bulk of the city's airport-related zoning code regulations. The title of the chapter 1838 is the LF Airport Landing Field District. I mention that because I won't refer to the full title, I'll just shorthand it for LF District. It should be noted that the initial regulations of the LF District date back to 1964, 5 years prior to the construction of the airport in 1969, and the most recent update to the LF District occurred in 1997. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the area around the airport. This slide depicts the airport influence area. Per WSDOT, the airport influence area is the area that has a direct effect on the airport and the area that the airport affects. The airport influence area for Auburn Municipal Airport was defined through the evaluation of several key factors. This includes the airport traffic pattern, airport noise contours, the FAR Part 77 surfaces, and generic accident distribution data. Let me point out a few things. So the yellow is the runway itself. The dark blue dash is the furthest extent of the FAR Part 77 surfaces. The surfaces are defined in Exhibit A and Exhibit C, that is the strike-through and clean versions of the text amendment, respectively. The bright teal are the noise contours. The noise contours depicted represent the noise exposure level where noise impacts may be significant for residential or other noise-sensitive uses. The green is the flight pattern for the airport. The smaller flight pattern is the helicopter pattern. And the red lines constitute each compatibility zone of the proposed airport overlay. I want to note that the airport overlay only extends as far as the largest red area. And I'll discuss the airport overlay in a little bit. Okay, so the next set of aerials is the area within the airport influence area, particularly near to the airport. The purpose is to show the increase in development or intensity over the years. So this slide depicts a 1990 Google Earth image showing the area around the airport. Right, this is about 12 years later, and this is 2002. You can see a lot of the vacant area has now filled in. And then this slide, not as drastic, but a little more of the vacant areas have filled in. This is a 2018 Google Earth image. So what's important to remember is that the most recent update to the LF district occurred in 1997. All right, so now let me walk through some of the code changes. Okay. So the next couple of slides, I'll walk through some of the key proposed changes to the airport zoning regulations. The strike-through underline version of the text amendment is in Exhibit A, and that starts on page 30 of your packet, and the clean version is in Exhibit C, and that starts on page 60. So now I'll briefly step through 1 through 5. Okay. All right, so now let me discuss the airport overlay. The airport overlay will be the mechanism in which regulations designed to prevent and deter incompatible uses are applied around the airport without changing the underlying land use designation and zoning districts of the parcels. The airport overlay will be added to the city's comprehensive zoning map as a zoning overlay. This exhibit, or the proposed overlay, is Exhibit B and is on page 59 of your packet. The original shape and extent of these 6 compatibility zones, you see the numbers 1 through 6, were created using the nationwide database of general aviation aircraft accidents and adjusted to be specific for the Auburn Airport. Okay, so let me discuss some of the airport overlay restrictions and standards. So this section does 2 things. First is that it prohibits certain uses within zones 1, 2, and 3. And 2, provides specific standards designed to mitigate potential adverse impacts when citing land uses in proximity to the airport. So let me point out where 1, 2, and 3 are. So zone 1 is the runway overlay zone, and it's purple. So the zones are duplicated in the south and the north. So the purple is zone 1. Zone 2 is the inner safety zone, and it's green. Zone 3 is the inner turning zone, and it is the blue pie-shaped zones. So zones 1 and 2, and really 3, but zones 1 and 2 are important because of the overlay. They represent the areas in which the risk of aircraft accidents is the greatest. Zone 3 represents the area in which departing aircraft may begin turning to fly over this area or to remain in the traffic pattern. So now, when assessing whether a land use is compatible around the airport, the WSDOT Guidebook provides 4 basic compatibility criteria. These criteria represent the most common effects that an airport can have on the surrounding area and the effects the surrounding area can have on an airport. This is where we take that information from the airport influence area map that you saw earlier, and we apply it to this overlay. So staff created an inventory of uses that currently exist within these compatibility zones, particularly zones 1 through 5. The criteria was used to assess whether these uses are compatible with the airport and airport operations. The criteria was also used to determine which uses could occur in the future based on the zoning districts that are contained within each of these zones 1 through 6. Now, it's important to note that since it's primarily about safety and the continued viability of airport operations, all zones do not need the same level of restrictions. Generally, the closer an area is to the airport, the greater the restrictions. So, for example, zone 6, which is orange, and it's the largest, is the largest and the least restrictive. Most of the uses that are being prohibited do not currently exist within zones 1, 2, or 3. And for those that do, those uses will be grandfathered to the current code. We are specifically designing the regulations not to make these uses or any use non-conforming. The prohibition of new uses will apply after the effective date of adoption. Okay. I'd like to highlight a specific standard of the proposed code, specifically that stormwater facilities within compatibility zones 1, 2, and 5 will be required to meet or exceed the recommendation in the city's Surface Water Management Manual, or SWIM. The City Utilities Division is intending to add a standard to the city SWIM, requiring the use of underground vaults, underground detention infiltration facilities, and low-impact development facilities that drain completely within 48 hours. This standard is intended to deter the congregation of wildlife in storm ponds and help address the challenge of wildlife strikes. It will apply to new and redeveloped parcels. So this image is an image of the storm vault that the city installed as part of the runway extension project. This vault replaced an open pond, which was a hazard to aviation safety because it was right next to the runway. Right, so staff is proposing a new maintenance and mitigation section, or mitigation standards. The effect of this section is twofold. When the height of any new, and I emphasize new, structure or tree exceeds the FAR Part 77 surfaces and then penetrates the airspace, the applicant may be required to install and maintain the markers and lights, such as you see on top of this light pole and on top of this sign, of which the city will require a public maintenance easement to allow city to access and inspect the markers and lights as needed. And applicants will be required to maintain their trees, just like this newly planted tree you see in this picture, so that it does not penetrate the airspace in the future. Okay. Moving on to the revised height compliance section. The purpose of this section is that where an object might have a height greater than the established surface, so those height limitations, an applicant will be able to demonstrate, will be required to demonstrate compliance with the height limitations. The revision to this section is to define how compliance must be demonstrated, essentially. Current code doesn't specify how, but in practice, these four methods shown on the screen are used. So in effect, we're codifying the methods currently used. In all, this will help catch future potential future obstructions during the review process. Examples of potential obstructions are what the arrows are pointing to, such as when HVAC units, are installed on top of buildings, or, during the review of landscape plans for, future tree height based on the tree species. This will also provide predictability and consistency for property owners and developers, since these four methods will be codified. And then lastly, moving on to the revised non-conforming section. As you've seen in Exhibit A and Exhibit C, the LF district contains sections related to non-conforming structures and uses. I've circled the four sections in the LF district on the left. The most significant change to the proposed to these non-conforming sections of the LF district involves tying them back to the non-conforming structures land and uses chapter of the zoning code. That's chapter 18.54. That's what the arrow is pointing to, shown here on the right. The non-conforming regulations of the LF district, they're not well defined, and which can create ambiguity. Making the connection between these two chapters is significant because the latter, that's chapter 1854, establishes clear thresholds of how and when non-conforming use can continue operations. This includes maintenance, repair, enlargement, and the alteration of non-conforming uses and structures. This will help create consistency and predictability of application of non-conforming standards. And I want to reiterate that uses under the overlay that exist prior to the future adoption of this code will not be considered non-conforming. Again, this is by design. The intent is not to make any existing use non-conforming, so it will remain vested as an outright permitted use in the respective zoning districts. Right. So this was the schedule for the code update. This code has been for the Planning Commission in 2 meetings and for a public hearing. Staff has held the consultation with the aviation community and the WashDOT Aviation Division. Exhibit D, which is on page 85 of your packet, is Exhibit D, basically, which is a letter of acknowledgement from the WashDOT Aviation Division. Now the code is tentatively scheduled to go before council at the November 15th council meeting. And that concludes my presentation. It was a lot of info, kind of boiled down, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Alexandria Council? I see Councilor Jairaj has his hand raised.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Alexandria, thank you for the presentation. There is one particular question. Can you educate me a little bit more on the overlays, especially on the outer safety zone, which is number 4? What is that for? On page 99.
Okay. Me. me get to it.
Alexandria, while you're looking at that, I guess question for Deputy Mayor, would you like me to share the screen so that I can show that map that Councilmember Jayaraj is referring to so all council members can see it?
That would be very helpful, Jeff. Yes.
Okay, Alex, while you do that, I'll go ahead and share my screen to get to that map.
Okay.
And Councilmember, you were asking about the turquoise area, that outer safety zone. Okay.
Right. Because I kind of understand all the way through the green zones, but when it came to the blue, I'm not exactly sure what's that for.
Sure. Just give me a second and I can get to it. Just have to. So I could just start generally. So there are 6 areas to the overlay, and functionally you're asking about 4. So let me go to this page.
I could say a little bit operationally for our airport. This is Tim, the airport manager.
I have it. I'm sorry, it took me a minute. So outer safety zone, it is along the extended runway center line, and I have the definition of that. It's on page 64 of the clean version of the packet, and it's essentially the extended off of the extended runway. So as planes take off from the runway, which is the red, you have zone 1, you have zone 2, and then you have zone 4, which is basically planes continuing their incline or descent. That's also, so if they're departing, it's where they continue their incline. And if they're arriving, that's where they start their descent. So that's essentially the purpose of zone 4. It's aircraft flying in or out of. They don't fly in as low altitude as zones 1 or 2, but that is essentially the path where planes they continue their incline or their descent. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that kind of answers my question, but I also would like to know where they would actually lift off. Is it in zone 1 or zone 5? And descend?
They'll lift off on 5. That's the runway area, the red area.
Okay. And 1 is for runway overlay zone. What does that
mean? Runway 1 is the runway overlay zone. And that is the area that's right adjacent to the runway.
Okay, so they should not be taking off from that area, but just before that.
Correct, in the red, which is the runway itself.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
One thing that I'd like to add to that is just as you're looking at this map, of course, again, that red is the runway, but as you look at purple, green, and turquoise in each direction, whether that's an ascent or a descent, there are noise and potential impacts. That's why we look at land use in these areas where the closer you get to the, whether your perspective is the beginning of the runway or the end of the runway, we have to look at land use more closely. It's riskier to place certain types of uses, whether or buildings, depending upon the height of the building in those locations, because they are more sensitive as planes are taking off and landing. So the purple, green, and turquoise, as it extends away from the runway, and then eventually when you get outside of the zones altogether, you have either increasing need to mitigate as you get closer to the runway, or say it the opposite way, less need to mitigate as you get away from the runway.
Okay, so the runway actually ends at the green zone, right?
It ends at the red. The
Red.
runway is fully contained within the red.
Correct.
Oh, okay. So, all right. And then you have turning areas on 3.
Correct.
So isn't that part of the runway then? 2 and
No, that's once the aircraft is lifted or as it's coming in and it's getting close to landing. The purple and the blue and those areas are very close to touchdown or
Okay.
right after takeoff. And they might start a turn movement right after they take off.
Correct. And that's what zone 3 is for.
Okay. So my question is green actually paved? The green zone.
No. So one purple and green, those are not paved. They actually have buildings underneath them, land uses underneath them. The paved runway, the paved runway is actually zone 5, the red. But everything. I was going to say everything outside of the red it has land uses under it.
So if the turning area is on 3, and you're saying there's buildings around there.
Correct.
It still doesn't make sense to me on that.
So the plane has taken off at that point and it's entering a turning movement and it's flying over those buildings.
Okay. It's in the air already.
Yeah, it's in the air. And that's these standards really focus on trying to make sure that there aren't vertical protrusions into the air that interfere with aircraft movement, but also make sure that the use that's inside the building is an appropriate type of use. I guess maybe a classic example is in that purple area or in that darker blue area, you wouldn't put necessarily like an elementary school or a daycare center in an area like that, because as much as we try to we don't want to think about accidents happening, but there's accident potential around these areas, and we want to make sure that we're not putting more intense uses or uses where you're going to get a lot of noise complaints later on. So if people live in those areas, they may move in, and then a month later, they're going to be calling the city a lot saying that the airplanes are too noisy. Can we do something about that? So we're looking at noise mitigation and accident potential mitigation, and just making sure that the buildings and the uses within those purple, blue, and green areas, all the areas really, are compatible with aircraft activity that's happening above them, not on their land.
All right. That makes total sense to me now. Thank you.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was wondering, so with the new map, are we expanding or shrinking anything?
No, not particularly. It has no effect on the underlying land use designation or zoning district. So we're not changing anything in that sense. There's really no change to the FAR Part 77 surfaces. So it's essentially just creating this new overlay. So to answer your question, it doesn't really expand or anything existing.
Oh, okay. So everything's the boundaries are all the same as they were before.
The boundaries of what?
The colored areas in the map.
Oh, so these areas they did not exist before. So this will be a new addition to the city's zoning map. So in that sense, it'll be completely new. But otherwise, the underlying zoning districts, the underlying land use designations, that will not change.
Oh, okay. Because so when you had that diagram earlier about the Auburn Airport influence area, that's new too, or existed. That's because there's sort of, anyway, I don't know. It's confusing as hell to me too.
Oh, yeah, it's there's a lot of technical data that went into this. So that is the Auburn influence area, and that will not be added to the city's zoning map or the city's land use map. It won't be added to any map. That was created to help us create that airport overlay. We needed to know where the noise contours were. We needed to know where the flight traffic pattern was. We needed to know, the extent of the FAR Part 77 services. So the data that went into creating that influence map helped us in turn create the new Auburn Airport overlay. For example, the noise contours on the influence map, we needed to know what's the extent of the noise contours. So where in effect is that noise level going to be high? And so where on the airport, the overlay map, would we need to prohibit noise sensitive uses? Does that make sense?
So on that earlier map, the influence area, that's been there for a long time, right?
That's out of data that we collected that is existing. Yes.
Okay. And then the red lines in the middle of that, those are all new.
Correct. That
Okay,
constitutes the
okay.
compatibility overlay.
So, okay. And then just a question. So in the green area, which is number 2, that's where Fred Meyer is. Is that like something that just got put there? And I mean, it doesn't seem like you'd want to put it there now.
That is actually, well, that's actually okay. In the sense that it's the uses that are being prohibited in zones 1, 2, and 3. They're really noise sensitive and congregations of, perhaps we can use the term vulnerable populations. We're talking about hospitals and schools and nursing homes, things, populations that if in an emergency might be difficult to mobilize and move. So the fact that you have large box retail there or retail nearby, that's actually compatible as we do around our airport. Okay. Yeah.
So population density isn't like that big. It's not
population density, but think of like schools and large apartment complexes. The nature of people coming and going from, a large retail places is very transient and changes throughout the hours of the day. So
one thing that I would mention is if I were a council member, I would probably be honing in on page 65 of your packet, because to me, that's where you see kind of what's changing. That's where you see a list of uses that might be allowed in the zoning designation typically, but would now be prohibited. And so it's a list of uses. We don't have residential zones around our airport. That's kind of a good thing. I've worked in communities before where they do have residential zones, and that's a hard land use to make compatible with an airport. So we're kind of lucky that we have more sort of industrial or heavier commercial zoning designations, but there is that list there that we would say, supportive housing might typically be allowed, or a hospital might typically be allowed in a particular zoning designation, but we don't want to see that right at the end of a runway in Auburn. So I think that list is important to kind of boil down to some of the, I don't know if, I don't want to say there's significant impacts, because I don't think we have a lot of this type of activity that's likely to occur near the airport anyway. But if you're reading the words of the code of what's changing, that I think that list is a good list where you can kind of zero in on maybe some of the more substantive impact of the code change.
Okay, yeah, because that makes you think, we do have all the housing right there in the turning area. I mean, that's like thousands of units, right?
Well, we have some existing housing, and like Alex said, the existing uses are perfectly fine. We're not calling them non-conforming, because non-conforming is a bad word for existing uses. but they are vested and grandfathered. It's just that we wouldn't, in order to make our land use more compatible with our airport that we own and manage, and to abide by the state and federal standards, we would say that there's some uses that we probably wouldn't be promoting too much more in those areas. I do think that it's important too to note that the letter that was provided by the state that's included in your packet that also calls out that this is really an excellent ordinance. I know that they've indicated that they'll probably take this ordinance and use it in other communities too.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Council? All right, Alexandria, great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kind of educating us on the elements of what we see every day when we watch planes fly over Lowe's and Fred Meyer. So now we know exactly what the elements of that is all about. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And Tim, thank you for joining us. All right, Council, our next item is ordinance number 6840. Once again, with Director Tate.
Yeah, again, thank you. And in this case, my job's pretty easy this evening. I'm going to be directing it over to other staff for presentations, but I'd like to introduce City Council to Josh Steiner. Josh is a senior planner with the City of Auburn in our Community Development Department. And Josh is pretty new to working in the city. So this is his first presentation and our first introduction to each other. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh for his presentation.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Council, for having me tonight. Let me share my screen. And hopefully everyone's just seeing a presentation.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, as Jeff mentioned, my name is Josh Steiner. I'm a senior planner in community development. I did start at the city back in July, but I'm leading long-range planning for the city. So under discussion tonight is the 2021 annual comprehensive plan amendments, something we do every year. I'd like to request that all questions be held until the end of the presentation. So the city first adopted a Growth Management Act compliant comprehensive plan in 1995. In 2015, the city adopted a substantially revised comprehensive plan as part of a periodic plan update. And then the plan has been updated annually ever since. Oops. There we go. The city's comprehensive plan document provides policy for basis for future development regulations and to ensure that they are consistent as required by city code. Also, the comprehensive plan document serves as the overarching policy document for the city and guides other city development regulations that are required to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Sure. Yep. So annually, the city amends its comprehensive plan. These are considered routine each year as distinguished from the major update. That's the 8-year plan update of the comprehensive plan that was last completed in 2015. We're currently planning to update that to have it complete by 2024. There are two sources of these annual amendments. One is city-initiated amendments in response to those items that are docketed. Those include text or map amendments, and private initiated amendments in response to applications that are submitted. Private initiated comprehensive plan amendment applications were accepted by the City of Auburn until Friday, June 7th, 2021 this year, and no private comprehensive plan amendments were received this year. So Auburn City Code outlines the process for submittal of private initiated amendments as well as general processing of comprehensive plan amendments as follows. So first, requests are reviewed during a public hearing before the City of Auburn Planning Commission. Next, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council for final action. And then City Council will consider and act on the amendments generally prior to the end of the year. The first two steps have been completed And the Planning Commission held a public hearing on October 19th and recommended approval of all amendments with condition. So this slide shows all of the policy and text amendment changes proposed, as well as map changes. So PT stands for policy and text, CPM is comprehensive plan map amendment. And so the Planning Commission was provided with documentation of these changes, and now the City Council has been provided with all the supporting documents contained in your packets. In the past, I know we've provided you with a large paper binder. This might look familiar to some of you, but as I understand, we've moved on to the fully electronic file, which is looks about 780 pieces of digital paper upon the council's request. So this working binder, that's all the information in your electronic packet, includes detailed staff analysis, state agency review, staff reports, larger size maps, as well as any public comments that were received. I'm hearing an echo. Hold on. Can you mute? Sorry. Alexandria is in the queue behind me. The binder also contains capital facilities plans 1 through 5. That's the school district capital facility plans, and as well as the city's capital facilities plan, and amendments to the transportation element, housing element, and land use elements. The binder also contains larger maps, as noted. So I'll go into greater detail about all these items. The first 4 items are capital facilities plans for the school district serving Auburn. So the City of Auburn receives annual updates for the 4 school districts. These capital facilities plans, as well as the city's capital facilities plan, are proposed to be incorporated by reference in the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan. Representatives from each school district were present and gave testimony at the October 19th Planning Commission public hearing. Representatives were available to provide additional information and context on their capital facility plans and to answer any of the Commission's questions. School district capital facility plans and supporting documents begin on page 209 of your packets. I'll also add that in addition to the capital facility plans, the school impact fees are also a component, and which I'll get to later on. So policy and text number 5, this relates to the city's capital facilities plan update. Information for the city's capital facilities plan was compiled by the finance department. As noted on the slide, there was an $8.6 million increase between 2021 and 2020, largely due to transportation and utility costs. Greater detail is located in your packet beginning on page 444. That includes a memorandum from the finance department, as well as the full capital facilities plan. Greater detail, and it also includes greater detail on projects. Policy and text number 6, this involves the volume 3 of this is the capital facilities element. So Water Services is currently requesting a 4-year extension of their comprehensive water plan, which was due to be updated in 2022 through the Department of Health. City Council had approved the adoption process for this extension at its August 2nd, 2021 meeting. This extension would allow for a full update in 2024 on the same timeline as the periodic update for all, which all the other departments will be participating in. The current plan analysis in the 2015 plan, the current comprehensive water plan, runs through 2026. This is because they had initially done a 10-year horizon period for analysis to prepare for a potential extension through the Department of Health. So therefore, capital projects, water demand, and growth projections are all still valid and accurate. And only some minor text and map changes are expected within the comprehensive water plan. These are things like updates to titles, years, and things of that nature. So no substantial changes to this element. Policy and text number 7. This is volume 5, the transportation element. One project was from the comprehensive plan was added to the transportation impact or transportation improvement program project list. So that project, which is a roundabout project in Lay Hill, both is in both the comprehensive plan project list as well as the transportation improvement program project list. And then one new project was added to the comprehensive plan project list. That's the Main Street Transit Oriented Development Project. There's a little bit of detail on the screen. It's actually 3 different components with 3 different costs associated with it, but generally these are improvements to support the revitalization of Auburn's downtown core, to support transit-oriented development, and include replacing roadways, parking, sidewalks, and other utilities. I can also note the edited comprehensive plan begins on page 698 of your packet. Policy and text number 8. This is the volume 2 of the housing element. So staff wishes to begin incorporating the housing action plan into our comprehensive plan. These updates set the foundation for staff to develop regulations to support policies. Comprehensive policies, plan policies are guiding principles that establish a philosophy that guides the development of regulation, development of programs, and budget investments. Policies are not laws. It is language that creates the foundation for the future development and adoption of laws. So on that note, housing action plan presentations were provided to City Council study sessions on February 22nd and May 24th of this year, and was approved by Council in 2021. A couple amendments to the housing element include adding language referencing the housing action plan within the introduction section, just to begin referencing the adoption of that particular document. Then updating policy H24 to reflect housing action plan recommendation to include minimizing displacement impacts to address community need for low and moderate income housing. This is to preserve existing affordable housing. The red line version of the text is located on page 18 of your packet. It's a simple text edit to include the specific language. Not only will this change, allow us to be consistent with the housing action plan, but it's also allow us to be consistent with PSRC Vision 2050, their policy, which supports identifying potential physical, economic, and cultural displacement and mitigating to the extent feasible. This is key since Auburn is a regional growth center and core city, and for us to keep maintaining these designations as an important PSRC agency. Policy and text number 9. This involves volume 1 of the land, which is the land use element. This policy also supports a preliminary recommendation from the housing action plan. This updates land use policy number 39 to include affordable housing as an approved supplemental amenity that would allow deviations in height, density, and other limitations. So these amenities are located on page 813 in your packet, but do include things like low income development, use of sustainable site and building techniques, building public space and art, transit-oriented development, landscaping and lighting, and bike shelters. So really this policy is intended to encourage development of affordable housing by providing building incentives. Really just allowing deviations in the height density or intensity by allowing allowing affordable housing as an approved supplemental amenity. So adding affordable housing as an amenity to the list. See, comprehensive plan map amendment number 1. This involves multiple maps found throughout volume 5 of the transportation element. This is actually the comprehensive transportation plan update, which is adopted by reference in the transportation element. Multiple maps have been updated to reflect current conditions, address formatting, and combine redundant maps. Changes to the maps were presented to the Planning Commission on September 8th by transportation staff. And final edited and final maps are located at the end of your packet. So after conducting the public hearing on October 19th, taking public testimony and deliberating, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the annual comprehensive plan amendments, both the map and text, on one condition, that minor changes to roadway names on maps contained in CPM 1 be addressed. These edits have been made and are reflected in the final maps found in your packet. So Ordinance 6840 has been prepared based on approval of these comprehensive plan amendments. Staff requests that this be forwarded for action on the December 6th council agenda. And with that, I'd like to take any questions.
Questions for Josh, Council? Okay, Josh, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I know in our packet we had about that much paper, and it was quite a bit to go through, but it's an annual thing we know we go through, and it's a lot of information, and can appreciate your diligence for that. So Councilmember Stearns has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not really sure how to identify this, but it's a question about the maps, and it's under map changes, which is 2.7, and it says intelligent transportation systems. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what those are or what that is.
Yeah.
I can jump in and talk about that if you like. Sorry, for the record, this is Cecile Malik, Senior Transportation Planner, and I led the map changes process. The intelligent transportation systems are essentially the camera systems that detect the cars when they come to the light and help change the signal timing, but it's also the cameras that you can see on the wall. So this is part of the transportation system that we have to enhance the intersection.
Oh, okay, makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cecile. Any other questions, Council? Okay, not seeing any. So, Josh, will you be doing the school impact fees as well?
I sure will.
Okay, so let's move right into ordinance number 6841 with Josh.
Great, thank you. Again, Josh Steiner with Community Development. So the last item, ordinance 6840, was related to amending the comprehensive plan to incorporate by reference each of the school district's capital facility plans. As the city does each year, ordinance 6841 is related to amending the city code section 1902 to adjust school impact fees for the year 2022 based on these capital facility plans. So these are the 4 school districts within the city of Auburn: Auburn School District, Derringer School District, Federal Way Public Schools, as well as Kent School District. Let's see. These are the four districts that fall within the city boundaries. Each of the district capital facility plans are incorporated by reference into the capital facilities element. So these include those four school districts.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
Were you intending to share your screen? There's not a presentation up.
Oh, it stopped. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry
Thank you,
about
Jeff.
that. I don't know why it turned off. So this is the previous slide. So these are the four school districts that fall within the city boundaries. Each of these school districts provide their capital facilities plans, a cover letter with a request for any fee increased, and the associated environmental review documents. These were submitted in accordance with City Code 1902-50, and copies of these capital facility plans are contained in the comprehensive plan amendment packet and binders. The Washington State Growth Management Act and amendments require that local government make provisions for schools and provides the authority for collecting school impact fees on behalf of each district. The fee is based on dwelling units, so there are separate rates for multiple family dwelling units and single family units. The impact fee calculation is based on a formula specified by City Code based on 50% of the need. The City Code also sets forth that at least on an annual basis, the City Council will review the capital facility plans provided by the districts to determine if any adjustment in fee is necessary. As specified by ACC 19.0260, the City Council has the authority to review the fees and establish a different amount different than identified in the capital facilities plan. So in a letter from the Auburn School District, the district has requested to revise their current tiered multifamily fee structure based upon the number of bedrooms per unit into a multifamily lump fee. This results in impact fee increases for studio and 1-bedrooms units and decreases for 2, 3, 4, and 5-bedroom units. So it sounds like this is the system that was used. They're requesting to move to the system that the other 3 districts currently use, the calculation the other districts use, and in a system that they were previously using before in 2019. So you'll see there's a decrease in single family, and then the decrease and increase just represents the range from studio to 5 bedrooms and this lump multifamily fee. Derringer School District, in their CFP, they requested impact fees that are an increase in both multifamily and single family fees using the impact fee calculated by City Code. However, the district is requesting impact fee rates consistent with those calculated in their 2021 capital facilities plan and adopted last year. So you'll notice single family and multifamily, these are the same rates as down below, the 4176 and the 789. These are the figures consistent with what's currently adopted. Historically, Auburn has adjusted school impact fees for the Derringer School District for consistency with other jurisdictions in Pierce County. The proposal for the fee begins on page 880 of the packet, which also represents the latest school impact fee rates reviewed by Pierce County. And so the maximum allowable fee by Pierce County is actually above both the rates shown here for single family and multifamily. So they're proposing to you just continue the same fee as last year. I know that they've had, from discussions with the district, they've had quite a few turnovers in staff. And so I think part of the reason for the continuing the fee is just potentially just kind of a loss of the expertise in doing this kind of work. Federal Way School District proposes decreases in multifamily impact fees from $16,003 to $15,073, a decrease of $930, as well as a decrease in single family fees from $3,243 to $1,845. That's a decrease of $1,398. One school in Federal Way Public Schools is located within Auburn city limits. Additionally, a portion of Auburn that overlaps with Federal Way School District does not have parcel zone multifamily. Kent proposes a modest increase in their fees. This coincides with an increase in the Consumer Price Index of 2.2% for the Puget Sound area. This is an increase they incorporate every year, and so that's the difference in single family and multifamily increases, somewhat modest. On this slide, just demonstrating the requested school impact fee changes for the 4 school districts. And Ordinance 6841 took into account the proposed school district fees requested by each individual school district. A couple of the highlights include fee changes for the Derringer School District. So the Derringer School District remained consistent with the 2021 Capital Facilities Plan calculation, as well as Auburn's request to return to a lump sum multifamily impact fee instead of the tiered system in place since 2019. So it's proposed to bring Ordinance 6841 as amended back to City Council for action on December 6th. And happy to take any questions.
Questions on impact fees for Josh, Council? Okay, Josh, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. No. All right, appreciate it. Thank you very much for the report and all the information. And we go through this annually, so really appreciate your hard work in putting all this together for us. And welcome aboard. All right.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we now have resolution number 5623 with Director Como.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey and Council. Tonight, I will ask Josh Arndt, the city's real estate manager, to present resolution number 5623, which is a fairly straightforward access easement with King County. Go ahead, Josh.
Right. Thank you, Kendra. Good evening, Council. For the record, Josh Arndt, real estate manager for the city of Auburn. I am going to attempt to share my screen. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to bring forward to Council ahead of potential vote, making Council aware of King County's request to obtain, as Kendra said, an access easement onto and across city property. And that easement will be brought forth as part of resolution 5623. So again, as previously mentioned, this is an access easement for the benefit of King County. King County, as you're looking at the illustration on the right-hand side of this the presentation, King County owns the property highlighted in blue, while the city owns the property highlighted in green. The area of the city property that this easement will affect is only that hatched area here in the uppermost part of the green area here. Now, because this is a government to government agreement and this easement will have very little impact on the city property, this is being proposed as a no fee easement to King County. The next slide, this illustration is just a zoomed out view showing Council, providing Council with a general sense of the location of this easement. So as you can see, it's in the northern part of Auburn, located along the west side of the Green River. So that's it. That concludes my presentation, unless there are any questions.
Questions for Josh, Council? Councilmember Stearns.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I walk across there every day. I didn't know I was walking across King County property. Who knew? But it's beautiful up there. So what is the county using it for? Are they?
So the bulk of the county's property is the west bank, that elevated portion. So a lot of it is revenement or dike property along the Green River there.
Right. Yeah, the Reddington Trail goes right there, and then there's sort of that side trail around the third runway mitigation area.
Yes.
And then the trail. Does the city? Do we own the trail too?
We do own the trail, and in fact, that diagram that was part of the presentation, if you continue to go left or to the west, it turns into the trail.
Okay, yeah. So that on that diagram, tract B, that would be green, right?
No, the tract, the parcel that's the paved trail, that's actually further west. And you're not able to see it on the illustration.
Okay, so the trail goes through the blue part then.
The paved trail is part of the blue part, and then it winds around to the west.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The third runway is, I can see that right at the top, and the trail's right there, and looks like track B. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, Josh, thank you again for your presentation, as always. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move into resolution number 5628. Once again, with Director Tate, who I know is going to pass us off.
Good guess. So I'd like to introduce Joy Scott, Community Services Manager, who will guide us all through the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. As Jeff said, I'm Joy Scott. I'm the Community Services Manager here with the City of Auburn. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So once a year at this time, almost always in the same presentation as our wonderful Parks Department overviews of year-end farmers market, I come before you to share information about our city's following year community development block grant annual action plan. So this evening, we're going to be talking about 2022 for our Cdbg dollars. So unlike our general fund human services dollars, which have a very flexible use that is guided by our human services funding priorities, our community development block grant dollars, the uses are guided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development and frequently support the city's housing repair program, public facility ADA improvements, some public services, and other activities. These are dollars that are guided by our consolidated plan and annual action plans, which I'll be talking about in a little bit more depth, and are approved annually by City Council. So as you all know at this point, since we've had these conversations many times before, the Cdbg Entitlement Program provides annual grants on a formula basis to entitled cities to develop viable urban communities. So these are formulas that take into account population, density, age of housing stock, low income, proportionate to the population. And each year, Congress modifies the formula slightly. So each of these plans that we develop is always based off of an estimate of what we think we will receive. And then partway into the year, we receive a more accurate number from HUD and we adjust our plans accordingly. So in order to be approved by our local HUD office and the federal office as well, projects have to align with HUD's national objectives. They have to be eligible under the guidelines that are set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they have to benefit low and moderate income persons. So there are a number of administrative requirements as part of Community Development Block Grant, and we are kind of just in one of these steps here. But a lot of the work that we do is guided by our 5-year strategic plan, which is the consolidated plan. Council approved our last consolidated plan in 2019 for the planning period of 2020 to 2024. And that's really what guides all of the work that goes into our annual action plans and how we decide to spend those monies between those years. Also, as we oversee these funds, we undergo public participation to ensure that there's opportunities for public comment on how these funds will be utilized. We have annual reporting mechanisms. Usually I come before you in about March to share information on how the dollars were spent and what we accomplished the prior year. We undergo annual monitoring with all of our subrecipients that receive contracts with these dollars. We do ongoing financial management and also project management, which can include things like environmental reviews, lead mitigations, and procurement procedures if we are subcontracting those funds. So there are some really specific eligible activities for community development block grant funds. HUD does place some limitations on us, and we typically have a somewhat similar portfolio from year to year, although we do see more significant changes when we have some strategic plan changes in that 5-year consolidated plan. So within a consolidated planning period, we typically have a similar range of activities that meet those overarching goals. The types of activities that we can work on are things like public facility ADA improvements. You'll often see sidewalk improvements that help our sidewalks in low-income residential areas conform with ADA requirements. Things like adding curb ramps where there are none, or replacing missing sections of sidewalk. We can put a maximum of 15% of our annual allocation towards public services, which is really any of those human services type purposes. Home rehabilitation, which our housing repair program is kind of an excellent example for. There are some types of economic development activities that can be undertaken, including job creation for low-income individuals, micro enterprise assistance. We also do put funding towards planning and capacity building sometimes, but we annually will include program admin costs. The maximum of that amount is 20%, and that's really to support our staff in overseeing these funds, as well as to support the staff that run our housing repair program internally. So as I mentioned, we have our residential rehabilitation project. We also have public service dollars this year in 2021 towards eviction prevention or rent assistance. In previous years, Cdbg dollars have gone towards employment training and healthcare to under and uninsured Auburn residents. This, however, was one of the shifts that we saw in the last consolidated planning period, with the needs assessment that was completed in 2019, really recommended that we allocate funding more specifically towards housing interventions and eviction prevention. So that was really a shift that took place out of the planning that was undertaken, the significant planning that was undertaken in 2019 that culminated in the council's adoption of our 2020 to 2024 plan. We also have supported fair housing testing and services in years past. Our last funding allocation towards fair housing testing was in 2019, together with King County and the cities of Bellevue and Federal Way and Kent, who are all part of our Urban County Consortium. And the information that we gathered from that informed the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, which was a document that the City Council adopted in 2019 that has really a wealth of information about barriers to accessing housing and barriers to fair housing choice in our community and in our region, and really informed the priorities that we set into place, not only for our 2020 to 2024 planning period, but as you'll see in the plan for next year, setting aside funding to go towards fair housing public services to really address the gaps that were found in that report. So we have 3 primary goals in our consolidated plan. The affordable housing goal is really about ensuring access to healthy and affordable housing for low and moderate income households throughout the region. This also incorporates our fair housing goals. Ending homelessness. So this is language that aligns with our county-wide continuum of care that is the Regional Homelessness Authority that oversees policy for addressing homelessness in King County. And community and economic development, which is focused on establishing and maintaining healthy, integrated, and vibrant communities. In our 2022 annual action plan, the timeline actually began quite a ways ago. So certainly in 2019, when our strategic plan for the following 5 years was adopted, but the application process for agencies to apply for providing those public services took place in March through May of 2020, combined with our application for general fund human services dollars. So while the city's budget and the city's human services funding is on a 2-year budget cycle. With HUD, we do require this annual allocation process. So we typically receive applications within our 2-year application cycle, and the committee reviews those applications and makes recommendations for the following 2 years of HUD funding. So those recommendations for public service activities were approved by the Human Services Committee in September of 2020. This year in mid-September, September 14th, we opened up some public comment periods to hear input on what should be incorporated into this plan. We hold 2 public comment periods and 2 hearings for this annual planning process. The first one always takes place before a plan is drafted so that any input can be taken into account before we write the plan. And then the second is after the draft plan has been published so that folks can react to what's been proposed. So the first comment period was open towards the end of September. We then held our first public hearing prior to drafting the plan at our September Human Services Committee meeting that was on September 27th. We then held a public comment 30-day period from October 1st, a little bit more than 30 days, to November 1st, with the second public hearing being held last week at the City Council meeting. In our annual action plan, we are expecting a funding allocation of $650,000. That's really just our best guess based on the allocation that we received this year, which is just over $651,000. As we do each year, as it was identified as a priority in our strategic plan approved by council, we try to go as close to that 15% maximum for public services as we can. As I mentioned previously, the activities that we have in the plan for 2022 are an eviction prevention program from Solid Ground, the Housing Stability Project, funded at $55,000, with Fair Housing Public Services at $40,000, which will be going out for a separate RFP. Our housing repair program is funded. This is the primary funding source for our housing repair program, and we serve at least 65 low to moderate income Auburn homeowners each year. Over 70% of those homeowners are seniors or individuals with disabilities, and well over 70% are actually low or very low income. So we're really working with primarily folks who are living on 0 to 30% of our area median income within that program. And that program provides minor home repairs and emergency home repairs so that folks can have immediate health issues addressed, things like a lack of heat, water intrusion from a leaky roof, and also helping our seniors who are in this housing that is affordable to them remain in their homes and age in place through accommodations for bathroom renovations or ramps to be able to have access to their home as they age. We also have funding set aside for sidewalk ADA improvements. These are managed by our Public Works Department, who oversee these projects within their larger portfolio of sidewalk projects each year. These projects are within low-income residential areas, and they really focus on improving accessibility, safety, and community connectedness so that residents in those areas can safely move between areas of Auburn and access transit, shopping, etc. And then we also have set aside $125,000 within the administration portion in order to support not only the significant planning efforts that go into managing these funds, but also the staff that are directly administering programs like our housing repair program. So as you'll see in your packet this evening, there is a draft resolution, Resolution 5628, and that resolution adopts the 2022 Community Development Block Grant Action Plan for our consolidated plan years 2020 to 2024. It's currently scheduled to come before Council on November 15th, so which is next week. And I am happy to take any questions that you might have.
Questions for Joy, Council? Okay, Councilmember Stearns, go ahead.
I'm losing it. I kept on hitting my mute and unmute button, thinking that was raise hand, and it wasn't. I thank you, Joy, and that's so cool. I really just wanted to say thank you to the staff for all the work on this, and I with homelessness being such a huge issue in our city and our region and the country. I really applaud the consolidated plan goals of dealing with affordable housing and ending homelessness. And so with those goals in mind, I'm just wondering, am I reading the plan wrong in that it looks like those goals are more on the service side and subject to a cap?
Yeah, so HUD does not really provide funding that supports those public services that we know to be effective interventions in those realms through these dollars. So they do put that cap at 15%. We are not allowed to hit 15% in our expenditures towards public services. And I will clarify, those three goals are actually the goals that are shared by our entire consortium. So that's all of King County and the 4 cities that are the Urban County Consortium cities in partnership with King County, which is Bellevue, Federal Way, Kent, and ourselves. And so there are entitlement jurisdictions within that group, and in particular in King County, that receive significantly larger dollar amounts than ours, and they're able to put funding more towards things like acquisition of properties and development than we would be able to with an allocation of $650,000.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like we could be, I'd like to see us spend more on, plan for more on ending homelessness and more on affordable housing than what we are, because it looks like we're spending more than half of the money on housing repairs, which is really important, but it's it's not like our #1 goal. And I mean, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that we've found is that in our housing repair program, it really is a homelessness prevention model where folks are really unable to stay in their homes if they're not able to have these basic repairs met. And because the homes that we're working with folks are so affordable to them, there is no equivalent for them to be able to remain in our community if they were to lose those housing options. So while it is not constructing new housing, or building additional affordable housing, it is really a homelessness prevention program in the way that it is designed and in the reality of what we hear from our participants.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, it would be great if we could track that, so we could say, hey, these are the number of people we were able to keep out of homelessness. And if we have that ability, that would be really important.
Absolutely. When we do our annual report for you in March that encompasses all of the achievements within our housing repair program, I'll make sure to spend some additional time on that data.
Councilmember Stearns and others, like all HUD grant programs, there are significant limitations on how you can spend the dollars and the parameters that HUD sets forth for those dollars overall. And, we do take action beyond the Community Development Block Grant for other programs in the city that provide dollars for other things related to that. So, Joy's program is limited to those specific items related to the HUD regulations and how we can spend those dollars within that. And as you mentioned, I think, the housing repair program is very significant here in Auburn. I had a neighbor just 2 houses down from me that had their roof replaced a few years ago. They're very low income and they had no way to do that. And they were recipients of the program through the city to get their roof replaced. I did mine, I paid for it, but they got theirs done, and they were very pleased to be able to have that so they could stay in their home, because it was at a point where their roof was in sad disrepair and it could have affected the residents overall. So, but again, as we go forward, we all know we have other opportunities to look at other items related to homelessness, affordable housing and such with other funding sources. Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Joy, for the presentation, and just say that, you know, this is a much better city, a much better community because of the work and that you do and the people you work with. So thank you for that. I did have a question. You may have already explained it, but there was a line in your presentation that referred to a fair housing test. Can you talk about that for just a second? What that means, what that's about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2019, in partnership with King County and the cities of Kent and Federal Way and Bellevue, we pooled funding in order to contract with the Fair Housing Center of Washington to conduct fair housing testing throughout King County and in particular in our jurisdictions. So there are a couple different ways that fair housing testing can look. One of them is reviewing things like postings for apartments and seeing if there's any language within those postings that is against kind of fair housing rules. One of the things that often comes up, for example, is there might be a post for an apartment advertised and it says no Section 8 vouchers. But of course, source of income discrimination is prohibited under state law and was prohibited under Auburn's law before that. The other type of testing that occurs is folks from a protected class, as well as folks who are not from that protected class, will go out to seek an apartment. They will go to kind of the same advertised unit, same building, and they will see if they are quoted a different price or shown a different unit, or told that apartment is not available if it is, or told that it doesn't accommodate families with children, or some other piece of information that would not be acceptable within that situation. And so what we found is, out of all of the tests, and of course, this is not statistically significant because we did not have enough funding to be able to do testing on such a scale that would produce a statistical significance. But in all of the tests, including in Auburn, over half of the tests had a discriminatory outcome when folks were seeking housing. So that is a huge outcome. It means in our community that even when there is housing available, we know that there are folks who are unable to access it. And it is, in fact, a worse outcome than we found when the city underwent fair housing testing in 2014 for the 2015 to 2019 analysis of impediments. So there's still more work to be done on the testing side. I will say that during that testing, it was only large property management companies that were tested. It did not incorporate smaller landlords. So it was not kind of a full picture of our rental units in Auburn or in King County, but the results really were quite concerning and indicated that we needed to do more proactive work in addressing fair housing in our community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it seems apparent that we have residents in our community that are testing landlords as well, and those landlords are failing. So thank you for that work.
Yeah.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Thank you, Claude. Deputy Mayor. Joyce, thank you for a great report. As always, you come to us and you give us all the details and everything, your guidelines and that you have to abide by. And as Claude said, HUD has a real strict guidelines for us to be able to use those fundings. And as we have been doing, we've been being able to keep these people, these elderly people in their homes, where you guys have gone in there and fixed their water heaters that have gone out and didn't have the money, and they were without warm water for quite a while until we stepped in. So thank you for always being there and bringing everything to the council so that we can really look at it. And I really think that we need to continue funding this program because we're doing a lot for a community to keep these people in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Brown for his question on testing. You know, I mean, the results you mentioned, Joy, are discouraging, and it seems like, you know, funding for our own city's testing of you know, residential places seems like that might be something, you know, we could also do with our own city funds rather than just, you know, waiting for Cdbg. But it does seem really important because it's a problem in, you know, people who are not getting homes or housing. Again, you know, they're at risk of becoming homeless. So, you know, anyway, it's thank you, Councilmember Brown.
All right, really quickly, Councilmember Troutman and I were attended the AWC Federal Legislative Priorities Committee meeting today, and one of the items is they're looking at the federal priorities for 2022 for Congress is to bolster up the affordable housing funding. I added a couple statements to it. One of my comments was related to the housing choice vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, where recipients of those vouchers have to go out and shop. They've got to look for a place to live. And they're limited to time. So if they can't find a place to live, or if a landlord won't rent to them and they just don't have any other opportunities, then they actually will lose that voucher because they time out. So I've asked AWC and their wording for 2022 to encourage Congress to look at other opportunities to increase the time frame for voucher holders so they have more opportunities to find housing. And then also has been mentioned, and Joy mentioned that, you know, we were one of the first cities to pass an ordinance for source of income discrimination, where landlords cannot not rent to somebody because of various income sources. So whether it be HEN or whether it be pension or Social Security or Section 8 voucher, and then we were able to finally get the state to pass the law as well a couple of years later. The problem is it's difficult to monitor. You know, if you get people coming in with complaints, you can monitor it, but it's very difficult to monitor. And as Councilmember Brown said, you know, the landlords are in some cases not doing what they should be doing, and landlord education is primary in that respect as well overall. So I just wanted to make those comments. But Joy, once again, thank you very much for your hard work and staying on top of our Cdbg, and hopefully Congress can give us a whole lot more money as we go forward here.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Appreciate it so much. All right, Council, we've been at this for a while. It is 7:45. I'm going to ask us to take a 5-minute break to 7:50, and we will proceed with the municipal services discussion items after the break. We are now recessed until 7:50 p.m. Thank you. Okay, everybody, welcome back. We will call the meeting back to order. And at this time, we will move to our municipal services discussion items. And I'll turn this session of the meeting over to Councilmember Jairaj.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I, at this time, would go ahead and turn it over to Chief Collier for the BOLO presentation.
Thank you, Council Member. Commander Christian Adams should be on the line with us. He's actually going to be presenting the BOLO app. As Council knows, this was approved in a budget request earlier this year. Commander Adams is going to talk about basically the devices themselves, the training that officers have gone through, and I believe he has a short video demonstration of them. And there he is. So I will turn it over to him.
All right, I'm back. Can everyone see the BOLO wrap slide? All right.
Commander, there we go.
Boom. All right, there we go. All right, so this is my BOLO wrap presentation. Thank you in advance for approving this device for us to use as a less lethal tool while we're out here in the city working hard to keep people safe. So, unfortunately, we can't meet in person. And so the slides will just kind of go over what the BOLO wrap is. It helps provide early intervention to reduce uses of hands-on force. It will be equipped in all the patrol vehicles, so it can be a pre-planned event. Officers arriving to a call where they believe a BOLO wrap will be utilized, they will grab it out of the vehicle, which is going to be mounted at the center console area. So it's not something they have to dig around for. It's readily accessible and ready to be used. Again, should be a pre-planned deployment. Each unit is $924.95. Each cartridge is $29.95. Every year to be certified, or the initial certification, you have to fire 2 test cartridges, and every year after that, it's only 1. So the BOLO wrap is not designed to be a non or a less lethal weapon. It is a pain compliance. It's not a pain compliance tool. Intended to replace any other tool, meant to be used against people that are actively assaultive. So if you've seen any of our social media videos, a lot of questions asked by people were, well, what if someone is running? It's not really designed to be used on someone who is actively running. It can be used as a distraction tool, but it's not advised to use on someone who is running. And it's not like any other tool that we have. And again, it is a remote restrained device. It's not an end all be all, but it is something that can help us in the course of our days. So BOLO wrap is used to take a subject into custody without additional uses of force, and hopefully without a risk of serious injury to the subject or the officer. Successful application is a tight wrap, meaning it helps restrain the body so they are not able to continue to fight or flee. A partial wrap, multiple wraps, as you'll see in the video later, no wrap, meaning that if it's displayed and it gains compliance, then that's a success. Again, the distraction startle response or attention diverted. And each device has a green laser on it, which is displayed towards the subject and hopefully can help gain compliance without using the device or going hands-on. So quick overview. It's charged by a blank 380 round, shoots out a Kevlar cord 7 feet 6 inches long with a 230-pound test strength at the velocity is listed below. I won't read all that to you. Comes out pretty quick and it does a good job. On the end of each of these tethers are barbs, hooks, 4 anchors with hooks. They are meant to wrap around the subject and grab onto their clothing, helping to restrict their movement and giving officers time to move in and to handcuff the individual. It should not be used on subjects without clothes on, because then it's going to go into their skin if it goes in at all. Situations where it may be useful: emotionally disturbed people, passively non-compliant subjects, mildly aggressive, mentally ill, or suicidal subjects, persons in crisis. So here is a bolo wrap, and it's kind of laid out for you. Obviously, if we were meeting in person, which we're not, I would have a device for everyone to look at and hold. If you do want to see one in person, I do have them in my office. Just let me know and I could let you see it, handle it if you'd like to, and just kind of get a feel for it. But as you see, it has a safety activation button, and the rest of the nomenclature is listed there. That is what a cartridge looks like. Obviously, it's assembled when we get them, but you see the partial round to help propel it, the hooks, the Kevlar tether. And again, it is very strong, and it's pretty effective. Starting, the more recent cartridges will have the little caps on them to help minimize skin penetration. From all the ones that we have deployed in training, no one had any skin penetration. And the one we used in the field, there was no skin penetration. So to use the device, they prefer you do a laser walk-up where you aim it at the person's feet and then move it up as you get ready to deploy the device. Oops, sorry, wrong way. So deployment considerations. Between the mid-thigh and the ankles, or between the elbows and the wrist. The successful deployment we had out in the field was the mid-thigh area. It caused a startle response from the subject, and he stopped walking and stopped being combative and was taken into custody without any injury. So minimum effective range is 10 feet. As it's deployed, the tether spreads out and expands. And as it hits the target, it wraps around. Maximum effective range is 25 feet. And so it's kind of similar to a taser, if you're familiar with those at all. You have to be kind of close, but you also could have a little bit more space. So tactical considerations, obviously we want to use these early in an encounter to help de-escalate the situation and not give the subject time to continue to formulate a plan to attack or to flee if they need to be taken into custody. It's very loud, sounds like a gunshot. And so we do train to notify everyone on scene before it's deployed so we don't cause any startle reflexes from officers on scene. We also, do not use it on people elevated because they could fall. Wrapping arms and legs can prevent them from catching themselves. And we also need to consider the surface that they might fall on. And then obviously we don't want the person to fall into a body of water. Being wrapped up in water is not good. Can't swim that way. Again, we talked about it earlier, but try not to use it on subjects to be running or walking. Obviously, if it's a life or death situation or something that could prevent them from harming themselves greatly, then we have to risk, risk versus benefit. So in this video or in this slide, you see someone has it applied to their upper body, and they were able to be placed in the handcuffs with the tether still intact on the person, which helps us, use less force because they can't fight if they're wrapped up. There's a video of it being deployed and then handcuffs being placed on the subject. And they're still tethered up. And so it's a great tool for us and it's safe.
So, officer,
and then
Mizuka,
here's
go
me.
ahead.
So that's a quick summary of the bolo wrap, what it could do and the things we plan to use it for. As you see at the end of the presentation there, I had 2 of them used on me. I'm wearing just my department issued jumpsuit with nothing special underneath, and it did not penetrate the skin, but it did wrap accordingly and if we had more time, I could show you more videos where I try to walk with the tethers around my legs and it helps restrict the movement. Yes, sir.
James, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. That's my thing to do. Commander Adams, is this regarded as use of force?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that means every time that bowler wrap is deployed, you would have to write up a use of force report.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody else? I can't see.
Yes, Councilmember Stearns has raised his hand.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Councilmember Jayaraj. Thanks, Commander. I'm glad. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm just watching you standing there getting wrapped. I was wondering who's going to be able to use them on the force. Who do you see having them, and how many of them do you see being deployed?
We have 40 of them right now, and we are getting the mounts mounted into the vehicles, the patrol vehicles. And so they will be issued to our patrol officers to use on the streets. And like I said, I didn't get much into the background of the incident that we used the first one on, but it was a subject who was throwing rocks at vehicles that were passing by, and officers went to contact him. He obviously has some mental health issues, was very combative. And instead of going hands-on and just rushing him, one of our wrap instructors got the bowler wrap, went up, did as he was trained. He deployed it on the subject at the upper thigh level. It wrapped him up, not very tight, but it wrapped him up. And the gentleman stopped completely what he was doing and just looked down and was confused about what was happening because he tried to take a step and couldn't walk. And that gave officers that, 3.5, 5 second window to move in quickly, grab control of his arms, and get him in a handcuff safely and get him the help that he needed at the time.
Wow. Is there like a policy that guides the use of the bowler wraps?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I'm not sure exactly who went.
Councilmember Trout Manuel was next.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Thank you. Commander Adams, when I was watching you getting wrapped, your neck kind of tensed up. Does it hurt?
No, it doesn't hurt, but it's just still that worrisome part when you know it's coming and you know it's coming, so you're nervous.
Okay. I just thought maybe it hurt because you kind of tensed up. So
it doesn't hurt, but it's just that nervousness of knowing it's coming and just waiting for that anticipation. You feel it for sure. You know it's there, but it didn't leave any marks or bruising. Like I said, we have several instructors in our department. At the training day put on by the bowler wrap company, we were probably hit with the device probably between 12 to 18 times, and no one had any injuries, any marks left on them. But it's just that anticipation of knowing it's coming, and it just makes you nervous.
Has it been tried on the women yet?
We have not used it on the female yet. In training, yes, but not on the street.
Okay. Let's see. I thank you, Councilmember Stern, for asking the questions about how many we had. You answered 40, and they're going to be in 40 vehicles.
Yes, in our patrol vehicles.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to pick them. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilmember Jayaraj. I appreciate your willingness to be the test subject for our video. But I want to thank you for your service to our community as a police officer and a commander. And also, I just want to say how much I appreciate the attempt by the department to reduce the impact of use of force. I know nobody, that we have working at the police department wants to hurt people. And to the extent that we can get people safely into custody, this council member really appreciates it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Councilmember J.R. Raj. Sir James. Christian, I was wondering, I noticed that they did that twice. Did that involve 2 separate cartridges?
Yes, they are one-time use cartridges, of course, because that makes more money for the company. But yes, we did 2. One to show the lower half of the wrapping, and then the second one to show upper body wrapping.
How long does it take to reload one of those things?
Seconds.
Just
If you will, if you give me a second. So here's one right here. If you can see it, kind of, sort of. To reload, just hit the lever on the bottom here. It's out. Take another one, put it in, you're ready to go.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. It's very enlightening. I've seen this thing used on TV and some of the SWAT programs, and it really does do the job.
Yes, yeah, it's a tool. It's another tool out there, and that's what we could use.
Yeah, non-lethal. Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember James. Commander, is there any kind of a verbal announcement that has to be made by the officer before deploying the BOLA wrap?
Yes, we suggest they announce BOLA or BOLA wrap. 1, to let other officers know what's happening. 2, to kind of confuse the subject that it's about to be used on. And, 3, because it's just good practice to let people know what's coming. And hopefully that will gain compliance as well. Because I know if I was hearing BOLA being yelled out by an officer, I would stop and think what's happening.
Is there any more questions? Thank you. By the way, thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the question. Any other questions? If not, we have one more presentation. By the way, thank you, Commander Adams. Really appreciate you. Next is the PAC update by, I have a name over here, by Cheryl Olson.
Thank you, City Council, for having me, and Commander Adams for inviting me to give the Police Advisory Committee update. I am Cheryl Olson. I am the pastor at Crossway Church on M Street. If you ever drive past there, that's where I work. And I'm also the District 2 Police Advisory Committee representative. I live and work in District 2, so it's my joy and my privilege to get to live here and work here and call Auburn home. As you know, the PAC was started in 2020 by Pastor Lambert, Commander Adams, and our former chief, Police O'Neill, and Police Chief O'Neill. And then also we have our new Police Chief Collier. He has come to a couple of our meetings so far, and it's been a joy to have him as well there. Our goal when we started was to reduce lethal ends during police interactions, both for police officers and for residents, those who are being pulled over, who are being investigated for a crime. Our goal was to have everyone go home or go to jail safely, that there was no major injuries happening as much as possible. Now, we can't eliminate all of that, but we really wanted to eliminate lethal uses of force in our police department. And so as we have moved forward in this year, we've done a lot of research. And if you've seen the news today, there was a lethal shooting in Renton with their police department with a suspect. So this is something that is still very important for us to talk about and be working towards. And with an era where people are committing suicide by police officer, we wanted to make sure and offer as many non-lethal options to our police officers when they were investigating crimes, when they were having interactions with people in the city, because not everyone is in a sound mind when they are being talked to by police officers. And we also wanted to make sure that we were treating everyone with respect, both officers and those being investigated. And so over this past year that we have been meeting as the PAC, Our goal has remained the same, but it's grown. And part of why that goal has grown is because of research. We have looked at data and statistics from the police department, from the chief, and from our patrol commander. We've had SWAT come in, and also the district judge for Auburn come in and talk to us about what the law says. There's also been some legislative changes that happened in July, which have changed some of our discussion, where what we were looking at before as non-lethal options with beanbag rounds and the wrap with a helmet, which is a yellow vest-like apparatus that incapacitates someone's legs as well, in addition to the bolo wrap. With these new legislation changes, the beanbag rounds are no longer a legal option for our officers to use. And so it's a non-lethal option that's been taken off the table when our officers are responding to an incident. And so that's something that we could use before July of 2021, and we can no longer use that in Auburn because of changes in Washington state. And so what our committee has heard overwhelmingly, what I've heard overwhelmingly from my District 2 residents, is that their top concerns are safety, homelessness, and mental health, both for residents and officers, because officers are running into traumatic situations day in and day out, especially in District 2. The officers in my district go from call to call to call every single shift. They don't really have a lot of time off to even talk to people in the area. They are going from one call to the next and responding over and over and over again. And so we wanted to make sure and talk about mental health and also crime investigation and prosecution. Part of what we're running into is if someone is facing a crime, they don't have a whole lot of follow-up necessarily with whether that crime is being investigated. Like my church was broken into, Pastor LaShun's church was broken into within a day of each other. And part of what we ran into was like, well, if you had cameras, we would investigate that. And that's what we're running into is some of the residents, if they don't have a camera, if they're a lower income family, they might not have access to the same resources that some of the other residents do with high-tech cameras or even a Ring camera, something that would go directly to their phone to record if someone is causing a crime on their property. And even then, with some of the changes to the law, a property crime is not being valued as a reasonable thing to go and investigate. And so there are a lot of residents who don't feel as safe because their property is not being deemed an important crime to prosecute in our area. There's been times when we're looking at these issues. I think that the PAC has had to look at the fact that these issues have been oversimplified when we're looking at homelessness or drug use. I loved that you guys were talking about affordable housing, that there's preventative measures being used to keep people in housing, because homelessness, a lot of times we oversimplify it where it's just a drug issue or it's just a money issue or it's just an affordable housing issue when it's really all of those things. It's also a mental health issue. And so the PAC has been looking at how have we been oversimplifying some of these issues over this past year when we're trying to meet people and talk to the people in our districts. And so there are two key issues that I think I've seen kind of move to the top when we are interviewing people and even talking as a group. I think that Auburn has a little bit of an identity issue that we don't really know who we are. We don't know our own history. How we're portrayed in the media is often South King County, which we can delight in or groan over. But I was born and raised in Vancouver, Washington, and Portland often calls them Vantucky, kind of backwoods, people they don't really want to associate with. But Vancouver really leaned into that identity. And I think there's some things we can do as a city of Auburn is really lean into this idea of South King County and how do we move beyond that, where we're known for being the safest place in South King County, where there's a lot of options that we can lean into with that bad press, but also that we're having a communication issue as well. There's sometimes where we're using terms and we don't all mean the same thing, even uses of force. Pretty much anything beyond talking to someone is a use of force now. So almost anything beyond talking to someone when you're an officer is going to be documented, which means you're going to be seeing a bunch of raises in the documentation of uses of force, which is going to look on paper like there's just all of this excessive or now additional uses of force. But if everything beyond talking to someone is now considered a use of force, that changes the documentation system. So we have some clarification of terms issues I think we need to go over. And also police policy versus the law. Currently, our local police department is trying to find clarification for when they can respond, how much de-escalation is considered appropriate. Like we saw today with this incident in Renton. They were de-escalating the situation and asking the person to no longer step forward. They had a gun in their hand. How long is enough de-escalation? I think that's part of what we're running into here, is that we need some clarification. And maybe that needs to happen between the city attorneys and the police department and our mayor, who is right now, I know, working with these families who have lost their homes last night. But just some communication, even with city council, what does that look like? What do we think is a reasonable response or de-escalation in these moments? What do our officers have the ability to really do? How can they respond? And not just looking at how they can't, but what can they do in these situations? Because it's really easy to get out in the weeds of what can't people do, but what can they do? Because without knowing what you can do, we can't really move forward with solutions. I also wanted to say, I hope that the Auburn Police Department really starts supporting. I know that they've kind of had a mixed feeling about community court. I hope we can all get together in that, but I really believe in local recidivism. I'm definitely biased in this, as is Sergeant Q, who has Q missions on Main Street. We work a lot in the mental health community together, and we've seen recidivism, not just locally, but globally, how if you serve in your community, people will stop committing as many crimes because they now have skin in the game where this is their city. They're seeing that when I steal from Safeway on Auburn Way, it makes the groceries astronomically more expensive than if I go to the next city over, that they start to see that my actions have consequences. And my hope is that we can use community court, not just for adults, but for juveniles as well, where as a parent of a teenager who had a really hard time dealing with 2020, he was a runaway much of last year. And even this year, I've struggled even within the law to be able to report him as a runaway because of how laws have changed. Whereas a parent of a 16-year-old, I have very little authority and a whole bunch of liability. And that's a really hard place to be as a parent who loves this city and wants to see it succeed and move into being one of the best places to live in King County, and not just being South King County, being Auburn, that South King County is known for who Auburn is and what we bring to the table. So most of what we're doing right now is the PAC is coming together and assessing this new hotel. Yes, it's great. It offers additional housing into Auburn. It also brings a huge safety risk of how many officers are we going to need. If we look at the record of what happened in Renton with 800 calls just to that location, our former chief told me he would need another 40 officers. That's a huge increase to say that to keep us at just what is considered homeostasis and the safety that we currently have, which as someone who lives downtown, it's not really always that safe. Like I cannot walk from my house, which is near Auburn High School, to just down the street to my office, which is on M Street at night, because it's not safe for me to walk there. And so the idea that just to keep that level of safety that doesn't really feel safe is going to require another 40 officers, which we don't have, causes me some concerns as both a resident and someone on this committee, as a parent, as someone who reaches out to the community and does community service. So not really sure what all to say beyond that, but I really appreciate the work that this council does and that the PAC does. It's a very diverse group of people with very different ideas of what Auburn maybe should look like. And that's why I bring up the identity issue, that not everybody agrees on what Auburn should be, who we are currently. And it's really hard to know where we go from here if we don't know who we are and where we are currently. So thank you. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I appreciate the time to speak tonight.
Does anyone have any questions of Pastor Olson?
Councilmember Stearns has raised his hand.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Councilmember Jayraj. Thank you, Pastor. I think you put your finger, hit the nail on the head. I mean, with the identity part at least. I mean, Auburn's changing, right? Auburn isn't what it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago. It is different. And, where it's changing. And I like to think it's changing for the better. It feels that way to me, but no doubt, I think, where I grew up in a different place, but, my memories of my little hometown, it's not that place anymore. So it's always, a challenge and to adapt and to watch things grow and change. But, I feel like, what the commission is adding to Auburn is just really important. I was wondering if, the commission ever reviews uses of force. Did you take a look at that?
We do look at that data. Thank you for that question. We do look at the data, which ends up being a really heavy meeting because you're having to look through a lot of the statistical data and times and what crimes are all being committed. So we do look at that, which is why we really pushed for more non-lethal options, where we didn't want just one option, we wanted multiple options. I know that with the new chief coming on board, we'll probably go back through some of that information. But we did look at those statistics to kind of look at what kind of lethal responses are happening, what non-lethal responses are happening, how many calls are resulting in kind of an escalated use of force. We actually, with the district judge coming, he told a story about a woman who was restrained with the wrap, where we put a helmet on her head, which I would love to see the wrap in every single patrol vehicle. It's something that helps restrain someone's movement, but also protects them for their safety, because oftentimes officers can't bring someone to score if they have an injury. We have to take them to the hospital. And then that complicates an issue depending on how someone at the hospital might see police officers or might see crime. And so if it's drug related and someone is causing themselves harm because they are high, it causes a whole bunch of kind of just muddies the issue per se, where if we have someone restrained and they have a helmet like this woman in court, it's easier to take them into custody and get them the kind of protection that they're needing, that they may not want themselves. Because I know that I work with a lot of criminals in the city. I hate to say it that way, but as a pastor, you run into a lot of people. And I've had several people say, yeah, if I just, hit my head and I'm injured, then they can't take me to score. Well, that's not necessarily true. And the goal for the wrap is so that people aren't injured and that we can really help hold people accountable, because helping them be held accountable hopefully changes, it rehabilitates them. That's the goal, right? That they're rehabilitated and can enter back as part of our community, because we want them to be part of Auburn, not just be a criminal in Auburn. We want them to be a resident that's functioning here.
Wow. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. I have a question for the PAC, basically based on some recent legislation that Olympia has imposed on many of the cities in the state. And what does the PAC feel about those new laws, and how we can perhaps amend some of the verbiage in some of those things? Have you got any thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Councilmember Baggett. And if I keep looking around, it's because I'm trying to find you. The pictures keep moving, and so I'm trying to find people's faces.
You can't hit a moving target,
well,
even
I'll
with
try,
a bowler wrap.
I'll try. Yeah, he did way better than I did when I got shot with a taser. So he took
Bless
that way
you.
better with a bowler wrap than a taser shot. So it depends, I think, who you would ask in the PAC, their response to that legislation. I think there's some people who are like, yes, it's so great. As you unpack it, the hope for the new legislation out of Olympia was that we would have a reduced number of fatalities, of fatal outcomes to police interactions. But when you make it so that the only crimes that can be pursued are violent crimes, and then you make it so the only response an officer can have is to pull out their service weapon, that makes it a very straight road from a violent issue where someone is combative to someone is being put down and losing their life. And then an officer is going through a huge investigation, as is a city. The press will bring it out into light and question everything. So I think some of the people, if they are someone who's very, anti-police, kind of maybe on the defund the police line, they may want to say like, yes, it's the best legislation ever. But I think some of those people in our group also would say that it's very unclear how an officer can respond, because part of that new legislation is an officer has to have eyewitness testimony in order to pursue a crime in progress. And there's very specific language about when and how an officer can respond. And then beyond that, I know that as we've talked with Patrol Commander Adams and our new Chief Collier, that there's just a seeking for clarity with the use of force response. And the Washington State Attorney General said they will not have a statement of clarification until July of 2022. So that's a year of police work without clarification for a law in place. And so, and it has a lot of maybe unintended consequences that I don't know. We go into this with our best intentions. I don't think people make these laws and these policy suggestions going, oh, I want to make it as hard as possible for everyone involved in this. I think people go into it with good motives and they don't always see where there's like a hole in the plan. And so if there is one thing that we could ask for help with, it would be asking the Washington State Attorney General to give some clarification sooner rather than later, even if it's on just part of the items that they've released, because a year is a really long time when you're asking people to actively do their job without clarification of the guidelines and the repercussions of their actions for these changes. And so I know that that's kind of where we're at this point, is even talking to the district judge, his perspective of what is legal doesn't necessarily align with maybe how our local police department feels. And so trying to get real clarification so that we're all on the same page of what does it mean? When can an officer respond? How can they respond? How much de-escalation? I think that's probably the one area that if we could really push the state to get more clarification on is how much
sometimes an officer has to make snap decisions in just seconds.
Yes.
In order to determine what course of action to take. And, we talk about probable cause, we talk about determining that. And even if you have an eyewitness or something to that effect, by the time you've determined if it's really probable cause or not, the perpetrator may be gone on his way somewhere. And, then pursuit is not even in the picture anymore. So I hope that the PAC takes some initiative from their perspective, and maybe let our legislators know what they are feeling. And again, I applaud your comments about the timeliness, because, like you said, it's going to be a year or 8 months or something to that effect before we can actually see some action coming out of Olympia if we wait. So I think we need to kind of put out a hue and cry, but that's just my own opinion. I don't think there's a council out there that supports their police officers more than we do. And I think that I applaud our police officers out there, what they do every day, and they put their lives in danger. And so it's not all lethal force by our police officers. It's they take their lives in tow as well. So, well, thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Councilmember Jay Giraj. I appreciate it very much. And Pastor Olson, thank you for your service to our community as being a member of the PAC. I'm curious, is there any aspect of serving on the PAC that you would like to see changed in terms of what your purview is, what the mission is?
I'm not sure. I think the hardest part right now is having a change in command. So a little bit of it feels like we're starting over to some extent, not entirely, but we've had some new committee members come on. We've also have a new chief of police, and that changes things. I mean, he was already our assistant chief. So he's been here. He's a 30-year veteran of law enforcement and of Auburn. So he knows the city, he knows the department, he knows what's going on. But it does take time because we all know him, but he doesn't know us. We know him by name, but we don't know him well. And so I think part of what I'm running into is just having the time with one another. If there was one thing, it would be just more time to get to know the officers, get to do more ride-alongs. Like I'm trying to do a ride-along in my district for all 3 shifts because it depends on the shift and the day of what you're going to see. I know at least in my street, there's a lot of things that happen where I have to giggle and go, well, that's Auburn. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not great. But as far as the PAC is concerned, I think that the biggest thing is just trying to find access to both residents and also communicating back with the department and people like you who are, making decisions for our city. I don't know how many of you live, in like the part of Auburn that is like the heartbeat of Auburn, or how often you're down here, walking the streets later at night, or down around town where we have a lot of issues. I think that you can see a different part of Auburn depending on when you're here and what you do, that you can have a totally and fundamentally different experience of what it means to be Auburn, depending on where you are, where you live, and what activities you participate in. And I think that that's my biggest thing as a member of the PAC, is trying to rub shoulders with as many different kinds of people as possible. And even having a voice for those homeless residents, because it's easy to consider them as non-residents because they are not living in a formal housing structure, but that does not mean that they're not a resident of our city, that there's still, a life that's here. And it's a lot of times they feel like they don't matter, the same way as, I've had people say, well, you people in your houses. Okay, well, what are you wanting me to bring back to the PAC? And, I think that we're doing that. We're talking about responses, even with our homeless individuals. But I think the purview is working well as far as like making recommendations. It's just getting to know our new chief and getting to know the new law. I think that's been a huge thing as well, because before you could make an arrest, and Commander Adams can correct me if I'm wrong, before to make an arrest, you could have reasonable suspicion, but now you cannot make an arrest on reasonable suspicion. You actually have to have, you actually have to have probable cause. There's a whole different level of what you need as far as evidentiary standards are concerned. And so I think that's part of it for me, is just relearning what we thought we knew, is kind of where I'm at, is relearning the law, because it has changed and it changes a lot of things.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Brown. Any other questions? If not, I have a question. Pastor Olson, something caught my ear when you were giving the presentation. You were saying something about renting, the county housing that they came up with, and that we needed 40 officers to take care of. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yes. So the county has purchased a hotel here in Auburn to provide housing to individuals. So it's to be a county-run hotel, but it's in our city. And from what I can understand, with the county purchasing that hotel, the county is not saying, here are King County officers to help police and keep some order here. It's just kind of like, this is in your city, whether it's been Burien or Renton. There's lots of cities in King County who are experiencing this. There was a hotel in Renton. It was, I think, formerly a Red Lion that was purchased to the point where it's going to cost the city millions of dollars to recoup and reestablish that area. And it's really changed the nature of crime in that area. And they had, just to that one location, an additional 800 police calls just for that hotel, which was set up for housing. And so that's part of what we're trying to look at as the PAC as well, is so if we expect the same kind of management, even though the county is saying there will be different management for that hotel, we don't have a guarantee for that necessarily. Now, I don't have access to all of what you and the mayor have talked to the county about, but what I do know is that promises are only as good as someone following through on them. Like, a promise is demonstrated on someone coming through with that. And so the county can say what they want to, but their track record is against them as far as police involved incidents. And if there's no kind of regulations for drug use in these places, there's no requirement for a clean and sober residency requirement. What that means is that we know that when people are using drugs, when they're out of control, they're probably going to behave in a way that is unregulated, which usually involves a police response. And so just the hotel existing in Auburn looks like it's going to mean an increase in calls, which are going to require more from Valley Regional, as well as, our paramedics, as well as our police officers. So it's going to change response times. It's going to change several things, is what it seems like to us from the PAC, based on the research that we've done. Does that answer your question, sir?
Councilmember Stearns has raised his hand.
I'll just jump in.
Yeah, I think we may have lost Councilmember J.
Oh no, we lost him. Oh well, bummer. No, I just wanted to add though, I really do support the hotel, and there is a big difference. You know, the hotel in Renton was set up as a response to the pandemic, so the intake process was shrunk. You know, where you know, they started taking people in, you know, really within a month, but sometimes within 2 weeks, and the goal was to, you know, separate people so to prevent the spread of the disease, and that's, you know, fundamentally different than what is being stood up in Auburn and other cities around King County. It's not, they're not being set up to stop the pandemic. They're being set up to stop homelessness, and you know, there is a lot of supportive services within the hotel, and you know, there may very well be some Valley Regional calls in there, but you know, I think there's a lot of sort of policy decision making that went into that, where yeah, you don't need to have an armed officer come in when it's a mental health crisis that can be solved by someone who's not. So I'm very optimistic. I know I know there are a lot of people who are really, you know, hopeful that, you know, these hotels can make a huge dent in the homelessness crisis that's just afflicting so many families, so many people, and yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
No, Councilman Stearns, I really appreciate that statement, because I'm not against the hotel. I just, having housed someone who is formerly homeless in Auburn, getting someone into housing doesn't change their mindset and help them understand. So for us, housing means safety. For them, housing means restriction sometimes, even if they know that the housing is in their best interest.
Right, that's why it's supportive housing. I mean, yeah, I don't think it would do any good just to say, hey, here's a room and a key card. That's not how it works. So I'm looking forward to it.
I really appreciate the work also that Kent Hay is doing. I think there's a lot of good work that Kent Hay is doing that works in tandem with what the PAC does and what the police department does, that I think is very helpful for our city. And I know our church as well is wanting to help with helping support people with their mental health struggles. We have a mental health support group for those reasons. I think that it's a very, like I said, it's a very complicated issue that we can sometimes oversimplify accidentally, and not that it's a bad option for the city, just trying to think proactively about what that might mean for our police department in our city, especially for that area where there's high crime and theft at the storage unit near there.
All right, I totally agree. Yeah, I think what we're really talking about is just what kind of law enforcement response might be appropriate for that particular structure, not whether the structure is good or bad.
Thank you, Councilmember Stearns. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Gerard. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. I got kicked out for a second.
I saw that, yes. Pastor Olson, I just wanted to thank you for being so engaged with the PAC and in the community. Your knowledge is just really above board, and you brought a lot of information to this council tonight. I have to agree with you with the Renton issue. I know the Renton City Council was opposed to that facility, and there was other things that happened within that facility that caused problems. As Councilmember Stearns mentioned, it happened during the height of the pandemic, so that may have been some cause and effect. We're not sure, but you know, I'm optimistically looking forward to not having similar issues at the Auburn Hotel once King County opens that to the homeless population, and moving forward with that. But again, thank you for your involvement with the PAC. Thank you for what you're doing. And I would ask Commander Adams and Chief Collier to have you back more often than not to brief the council, because I think you can provide some in-depth information to this council as we go through our decision-making process and what we need to do to kind of strengthen our responsibilities with ordinance and resolution. So great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate it. As a resident of Auburn, my husband and I bought our first house in Auburn, and we hope for it to be our forever home. So thank you very much for making Auburn what it is. I really love it here.
Councilmember Troutman.
Yeah, thank you. My question to you is, well, it's not a question. I just wanted to say thank you for coming, and I have to agree with Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. I have learned more from your report tonight that you have come to us as the PAC about issues and things that we're facing and things that you are considering. And thank you for being so honest about you not feeling safe in the city, because as I have been out there these past 6 months, I've been hearing the same thing from our constituents. And so it's like Deputy Mayor mentioned earlier, and also Councilmember DeCoursey, Baggett mentioned about the laws that have been changed and how our police have their hands tied. But the frustration that our constituents are feeling out there is they're getting pretty high. And so it would be really nice to know that our police officers are out there talking to our, community and telling them what they can do and what they can't do as well. I ended up handing out a lot of those little flyers that had all 15 of the bills that were passed to show them that what our police are facing. So thank you for coming to us and sharing more than I have ever heard before. And I agree, we need you to come back because you really fill us with a lot of things that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutman. Any other questions? If not, Pastor Olson, thank you for joining us this evening and enlightening us on what the PAC does and how the police department can be helped through your vision that you're passing on to us. It is very enlightening, and I thank you for it. And the invitation for you to join us again is always open. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey, it's your ball now.
Thank you, Councilmember J. Raj. Okay, Council, we've had a long evening this evening. Any other discussion items? I do want to make one comment. Mayor Backus was not able to join us this evening. As Pastor Olson mentioned, Mayor Backus was very busy today facilitating the assistance to the residents who were displaced in last night's apartment complex fire on 8th Northeast and R Street. Approximately, I believe, 20 residents were displaced. I have to say, I was monitoring some of the responses on Facebook related to the fire. And as Mayor Backus has always said, I am so pleased to hear the responses we have from our community residents who are stepping up and willing to help. Where do I drop off food? Where do I drop off clothing? What do you need? What can I help with? Those were just common responses that I was monitoring and saw, and just want to thank the residents of Auburn for stepping up once again in a tragic situation and helping those who have lost their homes with that. So, and we thank Mayor Backus and the others that are working with her for spending her day today and evening doing that facilitation for our residents who lost their homes as well. All right, any new business to cover? All right, we are adjourned. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.